First and foremost, I just want to hug everyone because this is a family reunion for all of us, and it's emotional. And please know that I love each and every one of you, and it is so good to see you. And while family and love is so important, and our beautiful Krabbe angels, both here and above, it's just good to see you all. We are going to start off with family introductions, if you don't mind. Again, this is a Zoom recording, so please welcome. I welcome the ones that are listening as well. And then we'll start with our program that you'll see in the folder. I will start off with myself. I'm Tammy Wilson. We are the Wilsons from Oregon. Not all of my family is here today, but Michael, who is my 13-year-old son, he has Krabbe and he's 13 years post-transplant. All right, I will just hand the baton off to each of you, and please, you can stand up where you're at or sit, whatever makes you comfortable, and please introduce yourselves.
I was going to let Brennan do it, but I guess he's at the end. So I'm Lisa. That's Brennan. Our twins are in kid care, and our daughter Victoria had Krabbe. We live in Pennsylvania.
Hey everyone, I'm Carlisle Krabbe. I'm the treasurer of KrabbeConnect, and I have a 8-year-old son named Cloud. He was diagnosed when he was 3, transplanted, and is doing well.
I have Judy Cushman, and Kevin, my husband, went to the room and he's going to come back. And then our daughter Kendra is in kid camp. And then Colin was diagnosed at 13 months old and he lived to be 8. And we are from Wisconsin.
Hi, Robert Steiner. I'm a geneticist and newborn screening professional.
Hi, I'm Natasha Spencer. I'm here from Chicago. I'm here in 2 capacities today. We're going to be I'm the assistant to the photographer assistant. My son Ali Witzak is here, who's assisting our very talented and generous photographer Jason Branscombe, who will be taking our photos. Ali and I are also here as members of an affected family. Our son Keenan Witzak, Ali's big brother, my son Keenan Witzak, bottom photo. Down there, was born in 2011, symptomatically diagnosed at 8 months, passed away at 7 years, 2018. Yeah, sorry, I'm nervous. I've done a lot of advocacy work since then, mostly in conjunction with the RUSP application, but this is my first time back in the room with affected families, so I'm feeling very sentimental and emotional because of it. We worked really hard to get Illinois to implement newborn screening that they had promised us back in 2007. Thank you to Terry and Rep here who got that law passed for us. It took Illinois 10 years to actually get that up and running. I was in the lab the day that those mass or tandem mass spectrometers turned on and the first blood spots were run. And I remember speaking to Patricia Callahan. We had this tremendous platform from the Chicago Tribune that gave the chronology of all of this. If you're interested, it was published in October of 2017 called a series called Doomed by Delay. But I was there with her and I remember saying, today, the day of this distinct line is drawn, and the families that come after ours will get to be angry and frustrated and disappointed and outraged by a whole set of circumstances that were different from ours, circumstances beyond their control, but they'll also have potential and hope and opportunity that we never received. And being here today, that's all come true. So I get to be here today and learn from all of you now, and it's very humbling. Thank you.
Hello, I am Carolyn. We're from Chicago. This is Alyssa, and this is my sister Carla and Elijah. Alyssa was diagnosed in 2003, but she started symptoms in 2001, 2 weeks after she turned 3. Misdiagnosed with encephalitis for 2 years. So we found out about Krabbe disease in 2003 of February. We had Elijah tested, and he had the transplant in 2003 of April. And what, you're 22 years post-transplant, I think? And she's 26, and Elijah's 24. Okay, that's it. I don't know.
Hi there, I'm Bill Schilling and this is my wife Dawn. We're from Michigan. Our son Matthew was diagnosed at 15 months in 1990 and passed away in 2006 at the age of 18.
Hi everyone, I'm Deepa Rajan. I'm a child neurologist at Pittsburgh, and I think of it as a blessing and with a lot of gratitude that I get to take care of a lot of families with and children with Krabbe's disease. So I'm very grateful to all of you, and I learned from all of you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Marley McGowan. I'm with Cure MLD. Not directly affected by Krabbe, but there's a lot we can learn from other communities, and I'm just here to sit in and absorb that knowledge. Thank you.
We are Terry and Reb from Chicago here, and we're not saying. Anyway, I'm nervous too. Right. We had Liam. He was born in 2000, Labor Day. He was born and he passed in 2001. And the Evanowski Foundation and Liam Foundation got together, and if it hadn't been for the Evanowski Foundation, he's the one who started the newborn screening in Illinois. And if it hadn't been for Keenan, he was the one who brought it home for us, right? So, yeah, very emotional, and this is awesome. Just to see you guys, we are so excited.
We live in
So, oh yeah, we live in Country Club Hills by Tilly Park. So there you go.
Hello, I'm excuse me, Elissa Roth. I'm the mother of Elissa Cannon, the mother of Graham Cannon. And I think he was the first one diagnosed in the state of Illinois after newborn screening had been passed. So thank you guys. I didn't know that this was all going to happen. He's 5. He was transplanted at UPMC. I'm going to talk in a minute, so a lot of this is in my speech, but he was transplanted. He received, he's in the clinical trial with Forge and received gene therapy. And you guys will see pictures of him in a minute. So yeah, thank you guys.
And I'm Michelle Salvo. I'm here from Forge Biologics. I work in their patient advocacy. So I'm just happy to be here, see all of you guys, meet you. If you have any questions, come find me too.
Okay, now we will have a welcome from Stacy, who was unable to be here because we obviously all believe in putting family first, and her stepson was graduating today. So she did send a video though.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Krabbe Family Warrior Meeting. We're so excited you're here. I'm Stacy Pike Langenfeld, president of KrabbeConnect. I have just a short introduction, a few words that I want to read to you as you gather today. So you'll see my eyes looking down a little bit as I reference my notes and such. I just want to say today we come together not as individuals affected by Krabbe disease, but as a resilient community bound by a common goal: to network, to learn, and to make strides towards a cure for Krabbe disease. Your presence here is a testament to the strength, courage, and unwavering dedication that define our collective journey. In this room, we find a network of support and understanding that only those who share our experiences can truly provide. Today is more than just about knowledge. It's also about a connection. It's about the comfort of knowing that we are not alone and that together we can turn our hopes into reality. We stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us, paving the way with their advocacy, their stories, and their contribution to research. As we gather here, let us be inspired by the progress we have made and fueled by the possibilities that truly lie ahead for our community. Every conversation, every story shared, and every new piece of knowledge brings us one step closer to our ultimate goal, to #CureKrabbe. So let's be kind and provide unwavering support, as each of us in this room have walked a different journey with Krabbe disease. Some diagnosed too late for treatment, some who've had access to treatment or even a clinical trial, and others who have chosen not to treat. Also, if we could, for a moment, have our board members stand up. They mean the world to me because we would not be here without them. Lisa Brackville, Carlisle Kerbo, and Tammy Wilson. Let's give them a round of applause as they devote many hours a month to help ensure families can navigate Krabbe disease a little easier through our programs and resources. These are the individuals you will want to reach out to or touch base with regards to anything KrabbeConnect or any additional questions after the meeting. Thank you for your relentless spirit, for your willingness to engage, and for your belief in future where Krabbe disease is a challenge we have overcome. Let's make this meeting a catalyst for change, a source of inspiration, and a celebration of our enduring hope. Together we are stronger, and together we can make a difference. Before I close out, and before Lisa leads the meeting, I want to introduce Natasha Spencer. She'll briefly introduce herself, her connection to Krabbe disease, and let you know how you can get a family photo. There are no charge for the photos, and you will receive a copy of the photos at a later date and time by email. This is a small gift to your family from KrabbeConnect. So please take time to listen to the information that's presented today. Learn how your participation in research is how we do and will cure Krabbe, and meet others in this shared journey we have together, because truly we are stronger together. And when we work together, we will change the ending to this disease as cure found. Thanks, everyone. Wish you the best today, and don't hesitate to reach out to me should you have any other questions or concerns. All the best. Bye-bye.
You got on here?
No.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So, first of all, I'd just like to point out our sponsors for this event is Forge Biologics and the Rosenau Family Research Foundation. They're a big help in everything that we do, and quite honestly, without them, we would not be as successful as we are. So I'm going to talk to you today about not the most exciting thing, but something that's a must for our organization, and that's the fundraising and our financials. So the first question is, why do we fundraise? Well, by nature, we are a nonprofit 501c3 corporation, and we're not in the business to make a profit. We seek out grants from different organizations, but the resources are limited and there are lots of nonprofits. So it's really sometimes hard to get those grants. But so we rely mostly on donations from the public and sponsorships from organizations such as Forge and the Rosenau Family Research Foundation. We also believe that the community deserves resources. And I know a lot of y'all are familiar with all of our resources, but some of the main ones are the patient assistance program. And I strongly encourage y'all to take advantage of that. We have a hardship program, which we assist with rent, mortgage, and medical assistance. We have an equipment exchange program where we'll pay for families to send equipment to another family. We also have the medical supply program where we've helped families with medical supplies and purchase medicine for their kids that they did not have the money for. And then we also have the holiday grant program, which we use to help families around the holidays to buy Christmas gifts, decorations, travel for their family to be able to enjoy the holidays. We also have on our website resource maps, and basically what the maps are, they provide patients, caregivers, and the medical community as a whole a snapshot of all of the available resources for us all to best navigate Krabbe disease. And the last thing is the educational support meeting, like the meeting we're having today. It enables us all to get together, collaborate, and work together to cure Krabbe. And lastly, but not least, is we believe our community deserves a cure. And as y'all know, research is very, very expensive, but it's needed to continue so we can find a cure for Krabbe disease. And KrabbeConnect, uses a portion of our money to support that research to advance and to find a cure for Krabbe disease. Next, I'm going to go through some of our events that we would love for y'all to participate in. I know a lot of y'all do already. Already in January and February, we had the Super Bowl squares. We had a candy fundraiser to raise money for KrabbeConnect. In March, we had the March Madness bracket that Brennan put together. We had a lot of participants and raised a lot of money for KrabbeConnect. In June, we have the Family Warrior meeting where we're all here today together. And then coming up in September, as you know, we used to have the Million Dreams Gala, but this year we're going to have an event in Hershey, Pennsylvania, with Brandon and Lisa as the host to celebrate the 10th birthday of Tori. So it's going to be a great time. There's going to be lots of stuff to do for the family, the kids. We're going to have a silent auction, a program led by Lisa. And there's also a lot of other stuff to do in Hershey, like the chocolate factory. So I know our family's personally looking forward to that.
I mean, we can. You can bring a tent, yes.
And then in October, we have the Anywhere Strides event. It's kind of replacing our Cure Krabbe challenge that we normally have. And what it is, it's a walk or a run where you can use your friends, family, raise money to raise money for KrabbeConnect. And we have lots of good incentives this year, depending on what you raise. There's prizes such as shirts, totes, tumblers, and even Yeti coolers. So it's a good opportunity to raise money and do some good and maybe earn a prize while you're doing it. The next thing we do every year is just the year-end campaign. It's kind of a drive at the end of the year as people are thinking about year-end donations and what they want to do to raise money for the organization moving forward into the next year. And another thing not on here, but I thought I should mention, are our Partner with Us family advice funds. What this is a way for families to establish a fund under the KrabbeConnect umbrella without all the expensive cost of a nonprofit and establishing that and dealing with all the rules and regulations. So it enables them to raise money, and we hold it in our bank account that earns interest. And then as the program see projects and things they want to support, they can advise us on how to spend the money. So it's a really good opportunity for people to get involved. Next, the KrabbeConnect financials. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but as you can see, we're kind of a young organization, started in 2017, I believe. The last 4 years, you can see that our revenue each year has gone up substantially. And I think the important thing to note about that is, number one, we're very thankful for everybody's support and donations. Without it, it wouldn't be possible. But we still have a long way to go to find a cure. And with all of us working together, we have a better chance of doing that. Next thing is kind of boring, unless you're an accountant, I guess, but is what is a 990? And it's a tax form that nonprofits are required to file with the IRS every year. And basically what it does is it's designed to increase financial transparency. And it includes a breakdown of revenues, expenses, and basically how we're achieving our mission every year in it. It also allows informed decision making for the general public. And by reviewing the organization's 990, the general public can educate themselves on our programs, how we spend our money, and can make an informed decision if we're a good organization that you want to donate to. And lastly, for advocacy and oversight, there's strict rules with nonprofits, obviously. And this is just a way for the IRS to ensure that we're compliant with the law. And it also allows organizations such as pharmaceutical companies and sponsors and those type organizations to just look at our financials and kind of see the transparency and make sure we're spending our dollars how we should be. And basically, just in conclusion, read this a little bit, but KrabbeConnect was formed to connect Krabbe patients and families with medical providers, researchers, pharma companies, and industry providers so we can collaborate together to ease the burden of Krabbe disease and to help cure Krabbe. It is a team effort, and we believe that we're all stronger when we work together. We can't be successful without your voice and your help, and we encourage you to stay engaged, check out our website, follow us on social media to keep up with all the latest news and events. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Don't hesitate to ask. And that's my part of the presentation. Anybody got any questions? All right, I'll turn it over to Lisa for an update on newborn screening.
Oh, I can. Thank you. Where'd he go? Is he back there? I think he said it didn't matter. All right, so I'm very excited to give a newborn screening update, and I will tell you my slides are already out of date because these were due on the 14th and things happened between now and the 14th. Also, if you have any questions throughout, like this is very informal, you can just ask me. So it actually was January 30th. That's a typo. But on January 30th, the ACHDNC voted to recommend that Krabbe disease be added to the federal recommended uniform screening panel. It is still, as of this morning, has not actually been added. So that's very important that we are using the correct wording, the correct terminology. It is not on the RUSP yet. They have until July 30th, which is Tori's birthday. So if they wait, we don't mind celebrating extra big that day, but yeah, so the Secretary of Health has to approve it, and HRSA will have that on their website. I check several times a day, like to see if it has been posted. And I was actually with HRSA people last week and they confirmed it has not been added. Anyway, so last year, South Carolina and Minnesota, in the last year, South Carolina and Minnesota began screening. The Minnesota story is remarkable because within the first month of screening, they picked up a baby. I've been in contact with the mom and the baby did really well through transplant. He is now trying to get into the clinical trial, but we just couldn't believe it. That had they waited until the fall, like Minnesota thought they were going to wait to implement, this child would not have a chance at life like he does now. And this is one of the slides that already is wrong because last week Iowa's Newborn Screening Advisory Board voted to add Krabbe disease, and so they will begin screening in 6 to 9 months. And so yeah, we have to wait, of course, to advertise that they're screening for lots of reasons, but they said in 6 to 9 months, the pilot should be up and running, which also means this map is out of date. But that's okay. So in this, the states that are in blue are currently screening. The ones that are kind of a peach color are ones that have RUSP alignment policies in place. So what that means is that these states have passed laws stating that whatever conditions are added to the federal recommended uniform screening panel or RUSP, they will screen for those conditions within a certain time frame. And each state has a different time frame and a different way of doing things because this is the United States and this is the way we do it. But most states will add conditions within 3 years. So that's why those are in peach, because those are kind of already taken care of once Krabbe disease is officially added to the RUSP. The ones in blue, there are ongoing advocacy efforts. Kansas, we have an in because the director of newborn screening is a Krabbe disease sibling. So he's already been applying for grants to get more equipment so that he can add Krabbe and MLD relatively soon. And then if you want to scan this QR code, you can. Part of my work with the Leukodystrophy Newborn Screening Action Network has been to make this data and this information that lives in my head and in my spreadsheet more accessible to all of you, because I know how complex all of this is. This has taken me years to fully understand. And so what I did is I don't think I have a slide with it. No, I don't. I created a strategic plan that kind of lays out how I think this is going to go based on RUSP alignment policies and even just, why does it always do that when you don't want it to? Yeah, so based on RUSP alignment policies, which states have active newborn screening advisory boards, things like that. But the moral of the story is, I don't think that we need to use legislative mandate in any state to see every state screening for Krabbe in the next 5 years. It actually could happen even sooner than that. So this plan lays it all out, and it's also at ldmbs.org if you're interested. But here's a map. Again, I know this is small. So blue is 2-year RUSP alignment states. Pink is 3-year. Green is already screening. The yellow states only add RUSP conditions, which there's actually a few more of those. Some of these fall into more than one category, so I had to just choose a color. The states in orange have active RUSP alignment efforts. Like there was recently a bill in Wisconsin that I don't think actually made it as far as we wanted it to. The ones in purple outsource their newborn screening to another state. So if you live in one of those states, you have to wait until the state that actually handles your newborn screening is screening for Krabbe disease. There's a lot of waiting involved in newborn screening, and I know it's frustrating. The states in blue have the active newborn screening advisory boards that are likely already looking at Krabbe disease. And then New Mexico is its own color because, well, New Mexico and Louisiana, they both have laws in place to screen for Krabbe disease, but have not yet been implemented. Louisiana, because of funding and a whole host of other issues that they have to solve with their public health department, but New Mexico uses Oregon. So until Oregon is screening, New Mexico cannot. Oh, okay. So this is another look at the strategic plan. So this is what it looks like, though it looks better on paper. But this is what we can anticipate. So the ACHDNC is expected to add it by July 30th, which means July of 26 is when the 2-year RUSP states would implement. 27 is when the 3-year RUSP states would implement. So honestly, by 2028, we should see most states screening for Krabbe. And I know just looking in this room, almost all of you are from states already screening. So that's good, but also I feel like I can't offer any wisdom as to what you can do. Here's a better breakdown of which states I think, again, all of this can change, but this is just based on my very thorough analysis of all this. These are the years I think we can expect to see implementation. And if you have any questions about why some of these are in these lists, ask me and I can tell you. Yes, because remember, I had to turn these in 2 weeks ago. So Iowa will be moved up, but we also need to have them define what they mean by pilot. And then we can also potentially then start working in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Alaska to move them up. But yeah, this is already out of date a little, which is good. We like that. Yes. We've been waiting for Iowa. So in summary, these are the states that have been my top priority because, which, like I said, we already accomplished Iowa. So cross that one off. These states all have publicly available nomination forms and processes for adding conditions. They all have an active newborn screening advisory board that has the authority to add conditions. Most of these states have historically added conditions fairly quickly. And then with the exception of Michigan, these states all also perform the newborn screening for other states, which multiplies their impact. So all in all, I think we are in a really good position with Krabbe disease newborn screening. We still have a lot of work to do, but I know that we have active advocates in most of these states who are ready and willing, and I'm obviously willing to help walk alongside you as well. I serve on a subcommittee of the Pennsylvania Newborn Screening Advisory Board, so I have learned how to handle those people. And then this is also not the most up-to-date image, but I've been working with a Master's of Public Health student who also works for Forge. And they've gifted us with this project. These will be available at ldmbs.org. They're just not yet because I have been away from home for 2 weeks and have not been working. But the student made these beautiful flyers with information for each state that's very specific. Like, here's the phone number in your state to call if you need to add Krabbe disease. Here's the email. Here's exactly who you can talk to. And so we are going to have these available as soon as we can for as many states as possible. But again, like obviously Ohio's already screening, Illinois is already screening, Michigan's not, but we're working on it. Iowa's about to screen. So in this room, this is not as relevant, but I know you all know people in these states that we can help distribute. And so with that, do we have any questions before we hand it off to Dr. Rajan?
Yes. Well, I'm curious about the pilot program in each state. Is there any way that they can shorten the pilot program based off of other states that have done pilot programs?
Not every state even does pilots. Sometimes the lab just needs to do it to make sure that they have their equipment up to date and that they obviously have to make sure that their algorithm is working, the test is working, and that it's accurately identifying the patients. I wish Dr. Gelb was here because then he could tell us the more specifics. But basically, that's why some states run it. They just want to be absolutely positive they're catching every baby that they should be catching, and they're not catching the ones that would be false positives. So with Iowa, they said they would start their pilot in 6 to 9 months, but we don't know. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to Carol to see, is that a statewide, is that population wide, like the whole state? So does it technically mean they're starting screening? So I need to learn a little bit more. That just happened a week ago. Any other newborn screening questions? You go ahead, come in. There's plenty of seats. All right, if not, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Rajan. It actually should say, oops, Deepa on there, but.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Deepa Rajan. I'm a child neurologist by training, and I direct the program at University of Pittsburgh. I wanted to give you guys a little background of how I got into this, and then go over what I think of as lessons that I have learned through this journey of transplantation and Krabbe's disease. Those are my disclosures. I work with a lot of neurodegenerative disorders, and I'm involved with clinical trials for many of them. So my journey started about 10 years ago, really trying to figure out undiagnosed diseases for children. That's how I started off. And so I built the neurogenetics program at University of Pittsburgh. The goal of that program was to see if we can harness, at that time, what was next generation technology to diagnose children who did not have a diagnosis. And I know all of you in this room probably understand the meaning of a diagnostic odyssey more than I can explain in words. And so that was the goal of the program. But the bottom line was, how can we really improve outcomes for our patients? And we can't improve outcomes unless we get to a diagnosis. So the neurogenetics program started with trying to figure out how we can get children diagnosed, but it evolved over years to based on the results. There are some children that we could actually find answers for, but in those children, we could not have, there are some diseases that had standards of care. There are many diseases that don't have standards of care. And there are some diseases that we can move from no standards of care to standards of care, and then possible gene therapy and trials. And I think we are fortunate to be in a room dealing with a disease that has moved through this journey over the last few years. But we still have diseases that have children who don't have a diagnosis, children who have an uncertain diagnosis, and children who have a definite diagnosis but have diseases in different stages of available treatments. And so my clinic really helps with some of that. And it was really serendipity that brought me in contact with Dr. Escolar and her tremendous program at University of Pittsburgh. And she dealt with children who had diagnosis, but moving diseases from, hey, we do have a definite diagnosis, but we don't have standards of care and we don't have treatments, to how do we get to these treatments, and then how do we refine these treatments to become better treatments for our children. And that's and as probably many of you know, with Maria's transition, I had now the opportunity to merge the two programs, so the neurogenetics program at Pittsburgh and the NDRD, to now what we call the UPMC Children's Center for Neurogenomics. So our program still exists. It has a broader wing that I see it. And I think of any neurodegenerative disease that you have to move it from the stage of discovery. Like for our children, when we have to get a diagnosis and move them to treatment, many of these diseases have to be moved from defining the disease, understanding the disease, meaning understanding the biology, understanding what targets could be there for treatment, getting disease model systems, and to move them to treatments and define standards of care, you have to define the natural history of the disease, understand whether there are biomarkers, understand how we can move that into clinical trials, and that would mean how can we get outcome measures. So really translate a human story into a scientific story so we can prove that our treatments really can help. And so the program really encompasses moving from clinic to the lab. So to kind of move from clinic to translational research, and then to move it to our basic science colleagues and bring back the knowledge that our basic science colleagues have into our patients. I don't have to define Krabbe's disease to this group. I was thinking when they missed the A in my room, in my name in the beginning, I kind of thought that's really all that happens many times with our children, right? In our blueprint of our codes, if a single letter gets changed, we can land up with downstream consequences. So Krabbe's disease is an autosomal recessive disease, meaning that you need to have some of these minute changes in our blueprints in our DNA, and that translates to a deficiency in an enzyme. The enzyme helps break down products in each of our cells. And if that doesn't happen, you accumulate products, and then that leads to disease. So the GALC gene has mutations that leads to a deficiency in the GALC enzyme, and subsequently there's an elevation of cytosine. The reason I put this chart in is for you to understand that while it seems simple, there are nuances at each of these steps. So there's, while we think of things as black and white, there's usually a spectrum at each stage, right? So these genetic changes, I always say this, we have about 10 to the power of 23 letters in our blueprint. If one of that changes, it could be a change that could lead me to be me and you. So no real consequences, but our differences. But one of these changes could also lead to disease. And while we have the technology to spit out these changes, we don't really have the full science to understand if that letter change in you and me is causing disease or is not in many of these changes, right? So we're still in the process of understanding that. And so as we get into the newborn screening era, it's important to understand that we might have certain answers in some children, but we might have variants of uncertain significance. So I don't know whether that change is going to cause clinical change down the lane or not. So there's a spectrum of uncertainty to certainty in each of these stages. Right? We still use GALC enzyme, and we all know that there can be pseudodeficiencies, meaning while I test it out in the lab, it can have a falsely low level, but in the body seems to be perfectly functioning well, right? So you could get a test that looks abnormal, but in the child it might not really be abnormal. And then psychosine, which is relatively new and been there for decades, but still relatively new in the large picture. And we're still trying to understand. We know how significant it is in early infantile Krabbe's disease, but we're still trying to understand the significance in the late and the adult diseases. So at each of these steps, while it is clear, there can be many layers of uncertainty that will need to be teased apart. But when you think about the differentiation, and that's what I had the glasses there for. When you think about how we classified Krabbe's disease, early infantile, late infantile, juvenile, adult, and then recognize that these are I think of it as lines on sand, and as we know the disease, we realize that it's really a spectrum. We need these differentiations so that we can have scientific studies and understand outcomes better. But for you and me sitting with the child in front of us, these are these differences can be hard to interpret in real life. And all of this occurs at a background when our children are myelin, their myelin is actually developing. So any child at birth has very little myelin. And over the period of the first 5 years, in fact, over the period of our lifetime, we myelinize our neurons. So I cannot think of the gray matter in the brain as kind of batteries sending out signals to your end organs or muscles, and the nerves as those conduits. And those cables are insulated by myelin. And the problem with Krabbe's disease is the myelinization. Right? So we're not able to send the signals from our gray matter down there because we're not able to myelinate. But our children, even normal children in the first 5 years, are just developing myelin. So we have all of this uncertainty that happens at a stage of development. So it adds more complexity to all of it, and to understand how one change in an alphabet in your gene can lead to a child that looks the phenotype of the child, that affects the child in a different way. We have the same gene change that could look different in two different kids. And that's the reason I mentioned that there's uncertainty at each of these stages that contributes to that. Okay, what do we know about transplantation in early infantile Krabbe's disease? So the very first paper that came out in 2005, and if you look at this curve, you see that there is a definite difference between children who are transplanted asymptomatically. So you see the flat line at the top, and children who are treated once they're symptomatic versus the children who are untreated with transplantation. So this is early infantile Krabbe's disease. We know bone marrow transplantation, so hematopoietic stem cell transplantation or umbilical cord blood cell transplantation prior to symptom onset leads to better survival, but after symptom onset fails to alter the neurological course of the disease in early infantile Krabbe's disease. We have long-term data now from a follow-up from these transplants. So, the first step was survival, but now is to understand what really is survival and what can be meaningful outcomes. So there are two studies that look at long-term follow-up after transplantation in early infantile Krabbe's disease. The first one looked at developmental outcomes after 15 years. It included 18 patients. 5 of them unfortunately passed away, 3 related to the peri-transplant period, so the complications of transplant. Of the 15 living patients, 5 were noted to be unable to walk, 7 walked with assistive devices, and 3 walked independently. And what interestingly that study noted was that there was no signs of progression on the brain MRI, while they thought there was continued peripheral neuropathy. Now, I want to explain that term a little better. Neurologists think of the nervous system as a central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the brain and the spinal cord is thought of as a central nervous system. And then the nerves that move out of the spinal cord to the muscles are thought of as the peripheral nervous system. You can have different symptoms based on what is affected more. we think of traditionally that if you have central demyelination, that children have a lot more spasticity, so much more tightness. But as the peripheral nerves get involved, you have loss of reflexes, and then you can have flaccidity. And Krabbe's unfortunately can have both, so it can have central and peripheral demyelination. And depending on how much of your peripheral versus your central nervous system, the child can look different, and the child can look different at different stages of the disease. Okay. The second study that looked at long-term functional outcomes of after bone marrow in early infantile Krabbe's disease included 19 patients. Again, they noted 5 died, 3 in the peri-transplant period. And this study looked at outcomes at 5 years. And at 5 years, they found out of the 19 patients, 6 were wheelchair bound, 4 with assistive devices, and 6 walked independently. 9 were verbal, 4 had abnormal speech, 2 had assistive communicative devices, and 1 was nonverbal. What was important about the study is that they note improved functional outcomes in those that were transplanted much early on compared to those that could be transplanted after. This graph, if you see, really pulls out what I think led to the study that we did, which I will talk about next. But if you look at this graph, the 3 blue lines in the middle are what we call normative. So the one right in the middle is the 50th centile. The x-axis, the horizontal line, is the calendar age of the child. The y-axis is when you do developmental testing, how does the child look based on development? And the 3 blue lines look at the 50th centile, so for the normal population, and 2 standard deviations. And you will see the cognitive development seems to be almost towards normal post-transplant, but gross motor skills still seem to lag behind. And that's what we mean by transplant seems to help with central demyelination, but we don't think it really helps with the peripheral neuropathy. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit more. We talked about early infantile Krabbe's disease. With late infantile Krabbe's disease, bone marrow transplant extends survival, but also improves cognitive and language functions, definitely when it is done before or during early symptom onset. But for those children who were transplanted symptomatically, if you look at the graphs, those that had symptom onset before 12 months probably did very close to the untreated patients, whereas those that were transplanted with symptom onset after 12 months had significant improvement. So really, with transplantation, we think it stops the demyelination that's related to the central nervous system, but we worry that that transplantation doesn't help with the peripheral nerve disease. There are really no long-term studies for looking at just the peripheral neuropathy. And because we now have newborn screening, thanks to all of this group's efforts, it's important that we understand this better. We have a treatment option, but we need to know how can we fine-tune this better for all of our patients. So I want to talk a little bit about the nerve conduction studies. All of you in this room know how it is. It's not an easy study to do. It's not something that I would like to put most of my children through. It's not pleasant. It's uncomfortable. It can be painful. And interestingly, it's very hard to get nerve conduction studies in children. And there's also a lack of normative data in children. You want to make sure that the temperature is right. If you have a warmer limb versus a colder limb, you can get different nerve conduction studies. If you do a nerve conduction study on your right arm today and 6 months later do it on the left, you can't compare either of them. So you need to make sure that the same limb is done in the same conditions with the same machine, and then you can compare confidently. But even then, it's hard to find normative data because our children grow in that period. 0 to 5 years, they grow. So the length of the nerve grows with it. And to find conduction velocities, how do we compare them? So these are the challenges that we face with nerve conductions. So the graphs that you will see, So what we try to do is to look at all the nerve conduction studies that were done at Pittsburgh. This was done under an IRB and collected longitudinally at our center for children who were transplanted and those that were not transplanted at regular intervals. And so we tried to go back and look and see what really happened to the nerve conduction studies with and without transplant. And I have a few graphs here. So I hope it translates, but the gray ones are natural history of Krabbe's disease, the lines on it. The red lines are those that were transplanted once they were symptomatic. The blue were those that were transplanted before they were symptomatic. And all of these are represented as z-scores, meaning they are comparing to a mean. So if you take nerve conduction studies for 100 children and get a mean of what it should be at that age, then we compare the nerve conduction studies of each of this child to that mean. So the black line really says what is normal. So what you will notice is, unfortunately, many of our children have abnormal nerve conduction disease. So peripheral neuropathy is very prevalent, and in Krabbe's disease, it can be very early. And unfortunately, what our analysis showed is out of the 297 nerve conduction studies that were done in 104 patients, 37 of these had transplant, and the children ranged from a few months to 10 years. And if you look at the results, if you looked at the sensory nerves, unfortunately, those who had transplant or those who did not have transplant looked very similar when it came to the peripheral neuropathy. It did not matter when you got the transplant, whether you got it before you were symptomatic or after. Unfortunately, the peripheral neuropathy continued to progress. And so if you took sensory nerves in the arms, it looked very similar. If you looked at the motor nerves, it also, and this was in the leg, it also looks similar, and motor nerves in different nerves, so in the hand. So all the bottom line is that if irrespective of where you got the nerve conduction studies, unfortunately, it looked like both in motor and sensory nerves that the peripheral neuropathy continued to progressively worsen in Krabbe's disease, despite transplantation, despite the timing of transplantation. What was important is that during that time, serial MRIs and cognitive testing or neurodevelopmental testing seemed to be stable in our children. So we think that transplantation can help stabilize the cognitive development if done pre-symptomatically or early symptomatically. But the peripheral neuropathy continues to progress. What does that translate to the child in front of me? Depending on the stage of disease, you could preserve cognitive capabilities, but unfortunately, the gross motor skills might continue to worsen with time. So I put this in there because it's easy for me to spit out these studies, but what does it translate to at an individual level? It's important to recognize that our studies can't translate into an individual patient outcome, right? And if I look across the room, I see many of you who've had intervention or no intervention, and each one of us looks different. We are still in that process of understanding why one person looks significantly different compared to the other with an intervention. And I think some of the things that are crucial is your level of enzyme that is functional. So whether you have early infantile Krabbe's disease, juvenile or adult, shows how much baseline enzyme you have. Also, despite this, you could still have a different involvement of the central nervous system versus the peripheral nervous system. And since transplant can help more with the central nervous system, depending on how much of your peripheral nervous system is affected, you could look different and the outcome of transplant could look different. And timing is crucial. We're always better with prevention than cure. So if we can get to our children early on, any of our interventions is probably going to work better than not. I look back at this and think, what is it that I take back from this? I'm glad we stand in a place that we have options for our families. I also think we're at a point where we have to look critically at these treatment options so that the future can look better than what it is today. So what we have right now is is things that can help central demyelination, but not peripheral demyelination. So the hope is that with the therapies and the trials that are out there, that we would improve the peripheral nerve disease. And that is going to be what I would be very watching with the hawk's eye to see if it could help improve the outcomes for our patients. I'm grateful I get the opportunity to present this. Please know that none of this is my work independently. This is all done, like they said, on the shoulders of many people behind. And the work in our clinic is a village. It takes many people to look at our children when they come for our evaluation. You would see, starting from our manager to our who coordinates all the appointments, to our therapists, to the multiple different specialists that you see. So I have a lot to thank for. I also have to thank Dr. Escolar and her team, Dr. Hoda Abdulhamid, who did these nerve conduction studies, and the Rosena Foundation for funding it. And most definitely all of our patients and our families, because these are not easy tests to endure. And I'm extremely grateful that we have the opportunity to look at some of these for our children. Open to questions. This is completely informal. I'm completely open to you telling me that you did not understand what I said. I would be happy to try and see whether we can translate. We all have to speak the same language.
Hello, thank you for your talk. It was very informative. I'm from Japan, and I'm actually a pharmaceutical institute in Japan. And so we're recently studying Krabbe disease, and I'm in charge of starting up a protocol for like in an in vitro plate study. And so I was kind of surprised that it stops demyelination by the stem cell treatment, but not so in the functional motor function of the peripheral. So I was kind of surprised that. So does that mean like it stops demyelination, but not so much in the remyelination stage, or like, is it, so we're currently looking at knocking down GALC genes and then seeing with our drugs if it could improve like GALC itself. Like, I think it's like the first stage or the first leading diagnosis probably. But so I was wondering, so is it in like a study in our, as a pharmaceutical, as like a scientist or a research institute, is it more critical to look at like the nerve conduction stages, or like, what do you think?
It's a tough question, right? I recognize that much of this is also suppositions. This is what we presume that it does, right? Whether it affects the remyelinization in the central nervous system differently from the peripheral nervous system, we don't have pathology studies to prove that. And we don't know whether it's a differential in the amount of enzyme that is available to the central nervous system, where is it harder to penetrate the barrier in the peripheral nervous system. That's the leading theory. That's the best that we can work with at this point of time. Yep. Thank you.
Hi, I am a sister of Krabbe kids, and I thought it was very interesting when you brought up the fact that one child can look so different from the other child. Through the symposiums that we go through, with my sister, a lot of parents, especially in the earlier times, they would ask Carolyn, like, oh my gosh, like Elijah, he's a Krabbe kid, and Alyssa is too, like, wow, and we would get so much praise, and people would just look at Carolyn and her kids and just like being mind blown all the time. And, you know, it really just hit home for us, for so many other families who children didn't have that, the chance to get the, I don't want to use the wrong terms, the blessing or just the choice or the chance that Carolyn's kids got. It, you know, was the grace of God that Alyssa was diagnosed first because her kids are really close in age, you know, but Alyssa got diagnosed and we didn't know, you know, where to go or where to turn. And the doctors would tell us all of the time, you know, when they were 3 and 2, that they would pass, you know, and that there was no cure and all of this. And Alyssa never got transplanted. So that was very scary for us, you know, and she does look, you know, disabled and all those things that a Krabbe patient, you know, I used the little air quotes, you know, what a Krabbe patient or a leukodystrophy patient would look like. And then you look at Elijah and he was able to get transplanted, you know, because of what Alyssa was going through. And when she got diagnosed, like you said, the sooner the better, you know, the timing, it was just all God's plan that it worked out for Elijah to get the transplant and stuff. So when you look at Krabbe Kids, you know, you guys, the families and the children, you guys are just wonderful because, and the neurologists and all of you guys, because looks they don't play a part in you guys' lives and things like that. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that because it all depends, and that's what you guys are fighting for, and we're fighting for that newborn screening and things like that, because this could be the next person's story, you know, with their children, because that newborn screening makes all the difference. And that's why Elijah is different. You know, he's still a Krabbe patient, is still a Krabbe child, you know, in the family, and Alyssa looks different too. So I just wanted to like acknowledge what you were
Thank you
saying
so much for sharing that.
with
This is, you know, I think this is the power of like coming together. From the parent perspective, thank you so much for sharing that. From the physician perspective, it daunts me that when we offer these treatments, even with these treatments, even if you pick children who are treated at the same time, they might not all look the same. And I think that's the challenge from our perspective, to see, you know, how is it that we can predict some of this, right? And I think newborn screening will open out a new set of challenges that I'm thankful for, but there will be challenges. How can we predict some of this? You want to do no harm to your child, so you want to make sure you are confident in your predictive capabilities before you offer something like a transplantation. It's not without side effects, so it's important to tread with care.
With the differences, I don't know how to ask this question, but how can you start looking at what makes the difference? You have 2 children that may have transplanted the same day. They may have same parents. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. They may have a different outcome. But what do you look at then, or have you thought about what you look at to see what the differences are from the beginning for the outcome?
That's a fascinating question. And this is really why some of our longitudinal studies are important for us to look back, right? And that's what I meant by, are there differences in how, So the gene change might be the same if you're from the same family, but there are multiple steps from that gene change to that protein change. And then the downstream effect of in how many cells, where in the cells, is your central nervous system affected more than the peripheral nervous system? And because of that is the outcome different. So we learn as we go. We did not know this before transplant. Now, 15 years later, we know this. And so hopefully for the next 15 years, we can look back at the data we collect and then try to see whether we can parse out what really makes a difference in the outcome. And that would be crucial. So ongoing research is going to be very important.
Scientists, I've learned, have a ton of patience because it does take so very long. So very long. Like you don't know what a transplant's going to do until the child reaches adulthood, you know? So
Yeah.
I just want to applaud you for your patience and continuing to
Oh, it's not
research
me, it's you.
diseases
Right?
like
It's
Krabbe.
important to you realize you're right. So peripheral neuropathy might not manifest till adolescence. So many of our transplant patients might look normal till they come through adolescence when their height increases and possibly their peripheral neuropathy becomes more obvious. So the effect of a treatment might not be able to be studied for a decade after it is instituted. So it's important to continue to stay together as a family, to contribute to the research and to look at all of these things. So thank you for that. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Before I bring up Alyssa to do her dental presentation, I just wanted to mention we do want to take a group photo at the end of the session. And I know people keep coming and going, and like our kids are in kids camp. And so if we could just, we'll try to end a couple minutes early so we could try to bring everybody back. But we want to take advantage of the gift Jason is giving to us with being here to photograph us. So just keep that in mind that at the end, we would love to take a group photo. Okay, with that, I'm sure you're going to introduce yourself, right? Do you want this mic? Yep. Okay, we'll get her mic'd up. Just a second.
Didn't wear the right outfit here.
Okay, perfect.
Real quick while she's getting set up, for the families that arrived later, please make sure you walk out with a Krabbe bag, a gift bag, as well as family photos. We'd love for you guys to have your family photos, and I'm sure Natasha's going around coordinating things, but if you walked in late and didn't get that information, please ask one of the board members or look up or meet up with Natasha. Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not as polished as Dr. Rajan when it comes to presenting. So I have my handy dandy paperwork to read off of. Let's see. My topic is oral health care for the pediatric patient receiving a bone marrow transplant. And my name is Dr. Alyssa Roth. I'm a board certified pediatric dentist, as well as a diplomat of the American Board of Pediatric Dentists. I'm a part owner in my practice, Small Town Dental Kids, in my hometown of Morton, Illinois, which is about 2.5 hours south of here. So I'm here to speak to you all on a few different levels. First off, I'm a researcher. I graduated from Southern Illinois University School of Dental Medicine in 2007. Went on to serve in the United States Navy in Okinawa, Japan for 2 years, and then an additional year on the USS Essex as a general dentist prior to deciding I wanted to be a pediatric dentist. I returned to the United States in 2010 and started my residency program at Children's Hospital, Colorado, where I graduated in 2012. During my residency program, I was presented with a Graduate Student Dental Research Award for my research entitled Oral Health Care for the Pediatric Patient Receiving Chemotherapy, Radiation, and Bone Marrow Transplant. This was in 2010. Little did I know that that project was going to actually become my life 12 years later. So the purpose of this project is to ensure that all transplant centers in the United States understood the importance of dental care prior to, during, and after treatment. As more and more transplants take place annually, parents and patients need to be made aware of dental implications that can occur. We are getting ready to do a secondary study as all hospitals still do not have a protocol in place for meeting dental needs during treatment. Cancer is the leading cause of death, disease-related death in children under the age of 14 in the United States, with the death rates declining dramatically and the 5-year survival rate increasing. Long-term medical and dental needs are more important than ever. But as we all know, cancer is not the only disease that is being treated with a bone marrow transplant and immunosuppressive regimens. Children diagnosed with non-malignant disorders, such as metabolic disorders, and leukodystrophy, such as Krabbe disease, are receiving these life-saving stem cell transplants as early as 30 to 45 days of life. With more and more transplants being successfully performed for various reasons, both here in the United States and abroad, it is important to increase awareness of the correlation of dental health to the need of the patient to have a dental home. Secondly, as a dental provider, I have seen many sick children along their journey to get healthy. Recently, I had a 12-year-old girl diagnosed with Fanconi anemia, who was then given a bone marrow transplant at Stanford University in California. During the workup phase of her diagnosis, I was happy to receive a letter from her transplant doctor requiring a dental exam, radiographs, and approval to proceed. When staring at this form, I realized how critical her dental evaluation was to a successful transplant. A tooth that I had been monitoring in my practice for the past 3 years that had a restoration placed by another dentist with suboptimal margins and the beginning of nerve pathology, all of a sudden became a tooth that I no longer wanted to monitor, but I wanted to have extracted. Thankfully, on this form from Stanford, there was a direct number to her physician, so I called and communicated with him. She had just received platelets and red blood cells, so was in a good spot to have the tooth extracted while she was in our office. And we were able to sign that form confidently that she wasn't going to have any tooth-related problems along her transplant journey. I have another patient who beat retinoblastoma at 2 months of age, just to find out at 20 months of age she had trilateral pineoblastoma. Her parents initially brought her in at age 1 as they wanted to be informed and aware of all complications that could arise from her treatment early on. As she transitioned to inpatient care, we were quick to realize there was no protocol at the children's hospital that she was at for any amount of oral care or dental care during her stay. So I FaceTime the family weekly along her journey to check in on them, as well as complete an oral exam to evaluate her mouth. The family was so excited when she was just discharged and allowed to come home that our office was literally one of the first stops. And I cannot stress enough the importance of being seen consistently by one provider. Many transplant programs, such as Stanford, do require that dental sign-off by a dental home, but not all centers have the same requirement. The child I monitored via FaceTime through her transplant process did not have any dental paperwork completed prior to starting her chemotherapeutic regimen. In fact, during her inpatient stay and upon discharge, the family was reminded not to floss and to only use a washcloth to clean her teeth. This patient has 20 teeth in her mouth, which is a complete set of baby teeth, no space in between, and she had just completed an intense regimen where she was eating high sugar, high carbohydrate foods. Clearly, it is our goal through our follow-up research to be published to make it the standard of care to ensure optimal dental results for each and every patient. This one small requirement helps prevent odontogenic infections from being the root cause of problems while the patient is immunocompromised. Many of our children with leukodystrophies are transplanted as infants, so they don't have any teeth, or as toddlers and they have very few teeth, and some of these are non-issues. However, good oral hygiene before the start of treatment helps ensure a low bacterial load, which is also vital. It is also important to note that most therapies have a wider and longer lasting impact when used during childhood than adulthood because of the active development of nearly all organ systems early in life. So here are two transplant warriors. Clearly, this is our 12-year-old with Fanconi anemia. Her dad is a tattoo artist and she's an artist, and she had a lot of time while she was inpatient and board. And so they created this picture that they auctioned off to raise money for Fanconi anemia. You can't really see, but the butterfly is a DNA double helix, and her donor cells came from her brother. So this is a depiction of her old cells and her old DNA leaving her body, and then the new cells coming into her body. And this is our little 24-month-old. Her long-term prognosis is poor, but her parents have a very positive outlook on everything. And she's a redhead, so she's a little spitfire. And then lastly, and most importantly, I'm the mother of Graham Cannon. Graham was born on August 23rd, 2018 in Peoria, Illinois. About a week after being home, we got the phone call from the pediatrician that some of the newborn screening results needed to be verified. We met with a geneticist in Peoria, had a peripheral blood draw sent off to Mayo Clinic, and sure enough, it was verified that Graham did indeed have infantile Krabbe disease. Thankfully, Graham was born in the right state, to the right family at the right time. And even though I, as a first-time mom, was a complete mess and took no part in getting everybody to the right spot, I had a brother living in Pittsburgh. My parents and my in-laws and my husband were quick to hop on the internet and do some research. I think we officially got the diagnosis on a Thursday morning. They had a phone call out to Pittsburgh Thursday afternoon. They were closed. They called us back Friday morning. And Monday, we were in Dr. Maria Escolar's office for our week-long evaluation. Graham was able to undergo an umbilical cord blood transplant at 40 days of age, and was fortunate enough to experience few setbacks during and or after transplant. He continues to amaze us with his zest for life, his willingness to try new things, and he has a wonderful memory. So, as you can see, I have seen the question you guys are all posing through many lenses: a researcher, a provider, and a mom. How do we fix yet another problem? Here is what we know. The younger the patient, the more likely chemotherapy seems to affect the oral tissues because of the high mitotic index of the mucosal cells in the mouth. In children less than 12, more than 90% will show some form of oral side effect. Children treated with chemotherapeutic agents at age 5 or less are at a greater risk for developing an odontogenic developmental abnormality because of the prolific activity of the dental stem cells during this period of their life. Since most of the children being treated with the bone marrow transplant for Krabbe disease and other leukodystrophies are under age 5, and the risk for additional complications are at an all-time high, it is important to pause and consider choosing a center of excellence that uses the reduced toxicity regimen. This regimen decreases both the intensity and duration of the chemotherapeutic agents, hopefully leading to fewer dental abnormalities and the same medical endpoint. A few take-home bullets to remember. The outcomes of both what teeth are impacted and how significant the impact is directly related to the age of the child and the duration of treatment. Due to the correlation between chemotherapeutic drugs and oral side effects, all children should be monitored by a dentist throughout treatment and continue care every 6 months following treatment. Some chemotherapeutic medications are known to cause more dental concerns than others. Regimens such as vincristine, actinomycin D, and daunorubicin are some of the known hard hitters. However, we must follow the protocol as recommended by the dental team. At the medical team, not the dental team, sorry. Dental and medical clinicians should pay close attention to the oral cavity for any malignant transformations, especially in patients who experience chronic or severe mucositis during treatment. And it is important to note that some patients who receive stem cell transplants may also develop chronic toxicity associated with the conditioning regimen, such as salivary gland dysfunction, craniofacial growth abnormalities, and chronic oral graft versus host disease. So the most common is the salivary gland dysfunction, and a lot of times kids either get a thick, ropey saliva or their salivary glands stop producing saliva. Saliva is important for the buffering capacity to reduce the number of cavities a child can get and the bacterial load in the mouth. So when you get the thick, ropey saliva, especially in a child with low tone, it becomes difficult for swallowing purposes. And a lot of times those kids will end up getting Botox in their salivary glands to help reduce that thick, ropey saliva. Since many of the non-malignant disorders are being treated in infancy and early childhood, altered dental growth and development is a frequent complication. Dental development of all teeth, excluding the wisdom teeth, takes up to 15 to 16 years to reach completion. Therefore, the teeth are in a constant stage of susceptibility to environmental disturbances. Primary teeth, also known as baby teeth, which there are 20 of, begin forming around the 6th week in utero, and mineralization of permanent teeth continues until age 15. Therefore, there's a great range of time in which dental developments may occur. Some of the more common changes we are seeing is in morphology, which is the size and the shape of the tooth, variation in the number of teeth, either too few or too many, arrested root development, malocclusion, and or changes in the quality and quantity of the layer of the tooth structure. So the image on the far left is a 3-year-old upper occlusal film. You see the 4 primary baby teeth and then the 4 permanent teeth that are unerupted. The second film is in a 3-year-old child that's had a bone marrow transplant. Again, we see the 4 primary teeth and then the 4 permanent teeth, but I don't know if you guys can make it out. There's an actual extra tooth that's conical and shaped. So what we did was we extracted this tooth and it allowed the extra tooth to come into the mouth. So not only did we have an irregularly shaped tooth, but we had a tooth in the wrong position. So these teeth are usually pretty easy to fix if you just take out the baby tooth, make a path of least resistance, and then exactly what happened to this child happens. The extra tooth comes in, and then eventually the permanent tooth will push that extra tooth out of the way and erupt like it's supposed to. Sometimes that extra tooth will be upside down and the crown of the tooth will be pointed toward the base of the nose, and that becomes problematic if that tooth starts migrating in the wrong direction, because it can actually erupt into the base of the nose. So those kids with these problems need to be identified early so we can ensure that we get them over to the oral surgeon to have the tooth extracted, because those would not be teeth that we would monitor. On the bottom here is a set of bite wing radiographs on a 3-year-old child that's not been put through a bone marrow transplant. And on the top are bite wings of a 3-year-old child who has had a bone marrow transplant. So you can see the form of the tooth structure is symmetrical. It's nice and smooth. There's delineation between the enamel, which is the outer part of the tooth structure, the dentin, and the nerve structure of the tooth. And then in the top images, especially on the image on the top left, that tooth in the very back, corrugated surface of the tooth, not smooth at all. You have some extra lumps and bumps off the back side of that last molar, and the delineation between each of the layers of tooth structure is not as defined as in the child who hasn't been put through a bone marrow transplant. So my suggestion is to find a pediatric dentist early on. A child's initial visit should be around age 1. The American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry makes it really easy to find someone in your area. aapd.org, put in your zip code, and people in your area will populate. Make sure that oral health care is a priority to prevent any bacterial, viral, or fungal infections from starting in the mouth. By age 3, a child should have an upper and lower occlusal to ensure the front, primary, and permanent teeth are developing like they should be. By age 4, the bite wing should be taken to assess the health of the primary back teeth. And by age 6 or 7, a child should have their first panoramic film to make sure that all primary and permanent teeth are in the correct position in the child's mouth. Once that radiograph has been taken and evaluated, a plan can be initiated. So if problems are identified early, it is easier to financially plan costs associated with dental concerns. Again, a child may have a lifetime of dental needs depending on if the teeth impacted are in the primary dentition, the permanent dentition, or both. So here we have another example of the tooth structure did not form as strongly as it should have. So the number and placement of the tooth is correct, that tooth on the lower left. But there is an enamel surface defect called enamel hypoplasia. It may be mild and result in pitting of the enamel surface. It may develop a horizontal line across the enamel surface of the crown, or if the ameloblastic activity of the tooth has been disrupted or disturbed for a prolonged period of time, there's a large area of irregular or imperfect enamel. And that's what happened in this situation. These teeth can be more sensitive to temperatures, so hot and colds can bother a tooth like this, so can sweets. They can become carious, or they can get a cavity a little bit more easily than other teeth because that hypoplastic enamel is not as strong as regular enamel. So constant monitoring and regular radiographs also important. This is my child's tooth, so it is not sensitive, and if it becomes sensitive, then what we'll end up doing for treatment is putting a stainless steel crown on the tooth. And what that does is 360 protection to prevent it from breaking down, but it gets rid of the sensitivity as well. If the number of teeth is impacted, if the number of teeth is the problem, partial dentures can be constructed. And we have seen 2- and 3-year-old children wear partial dentures successfully. Their ability to chew food increases, which would improve their nutritional status. And having the correct number and placement of teeth ensures the tongue has a restricted growth pattern and helps with correct tongue placement for speech sounds, swallowing, and the natural rest position of the tongue to be at the roof of the mouth. A partial denture can be adjusted or made at intervals to allow for the eruption of permanent teeth. And denture construction at an early age can also help reduce the psychological problem of the child's feeling different. If the permanent teeth erupt in a good position and in a favorable relationship to one another, partial dentures may serve until the child is old enough for implants or fixed bridge work. Orthodontic and surgical procedures may be necessary before that prosthodontic work can begin. So this child is in our practice. He does not have a leukodystrophy, but he has ectodermal dysplasia. So teeth, skin, hair, nails, sweat glands are all impacted. But as you can see with his teeth, they're conical in shape. There is a lot of spacing between the teeth because he doesn't have the correct number of teeth. And so making a little partial denture for him to kind of get that more natural smile made him pretty happy. Many times the shape of an individual tooth or teeth is the concern, as in you have a tooth that is conical in shape. If that is the primary concern, aesthetic restorations can be placed. Bonding techniques have improved to allow for composite buildups. You can also put a stainless steel crown with a composite facing or a porcelain crown on these teeth. So this is my child again. Graham had that extra tooth come in. He called it his shark tooth. And for the longest time, he really liked it. I wasn't really a proud dental mama to send him to school with that, but he did not want it fixed. So one Thursday morning here in the last couple of weeks, he woke up and he said he wanted his shark tooth fixed today. It's like, well, buddy, like it's summer, all the kids are out of school, we're really busy. I don't know if this is going to happen. He's like, well, I don't know if you're going to be able to fix it tomorrow because I might not want it fixed tomorrow. Okay, so we're fixing it today. So, well, I don't know if the babysitter has the car seats in the car. He said, well, call Gaga. That's Grandma. So Graham made it to the office and he didn't want to use nitrous. He wanted to watch Bluey. He didn't want anything in his mouth, but he wanted me to fix his tooth. So we shaved down the front part of the tooth because it's at about a 45-degree angle. And we did the best that we could to make it look like the neighboring teeth. He woke up the next morning, goes, Mom, is my tooth always going to feel this slick? Sure is, buddy. Sure is. So as a child transitions into permanent dentition, the type of concern remains the same. However, the number of specialists to correct the underlying problems can increase. In the teenage years, a child is frequently moved to a general dentist. Depending on the complexity of the case, many general dentists may require additional services provided by oral surgeons for extractions of teeth or implant placement, orthodontists to straighten the teeth, hold space for implants or close space, and prosthodontists to restore teeth cosmetically. The more specialists involved, the more important it is to make sure the entire team communicates and has the same vision from the very beginning to achieve the best possible outcome for the patient. It is also important to remember that space holding appliances such as partial dentures, orthodontics, crowns require diligent maintenance by the parent, especially in a child who has porous or weak enamel, or in a lower tone child that has the inability to properly care for their own mouth. Even though as parents, we want our children to have perfect smiles and teeth, we need to make sure to keep the child's interests in mind. As you can see, there's a lot to discuss with this topic. We really literally just skimmed the surface, and every case is very individualized depending on what teeth are affected and if it's in the primary dentition or the permanent dentition. But I hope you found it somewhat interesting. This is our family. This is little Graham right here. He's 5, and his little brother Jude, who is 3. My email is provided. If you guys have any questions, you can feel free to contact me.
So I actually did not know your story, like
Okay.
pre-Graham story.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So I literally think when our Illinois advocate families out here I had no idea you guys were going to be here. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to make this presentation today, because that is quite amazing that all came to fruition during introductions. So thank you guys for all of your advocacy in the state of Illinois.
Does anybody have any questions? Or are there any online? Forget to ask about.
We live in a small town, so
Sure.
we kind of feel like we're in a desert, when
Yeah.
it comes to dental care. And our son's had a lot of enamel loss.
Okay.
And we take care of his teeth daily, 3 times a day. But it's to the point where he's even had a tooth broke off that was a molar that wasn't supposed to come out till later. And we don't have any pediatric dentists, but we do the best we can around where we're at. And our dentist, after they extracted that tooth, they put, I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it was sodium something, but they put it on the spots of his teeth that had enamel loss.
Okay.
And it was supposed to help preserve the enamel.
Did it turn black?
It turned black.
Uh-huh.
And, obviously it's not the best appearance,
Mhm.
but my question was, being the fact that we take care of his teeth so well, is there anything else that we should be doing to
Where
prevent?
do you guys go do you go to UPMC?
We go to UPMC, but we've never seen the dental program there.
I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But most children's hospitals have a dental residency or practitioners that practice. So for a lot of people that live in small towns where a pediatric dentist isn't super easy to get to, that would be a recommendation. And or just make a trip.
Yeah. Is there any obviously,
Where are you guys you're in Georgia?
Little town called Bainbridge, Georgia. It's
Okay.
like 10,000 people. But is there anything as far as being proactive? We use like the enamel toothpaste and things like that. But is there any other recommendations you have just as far as day to day?
Other than, the fluoride toothpaste twice a day and flossing for him, and then trying to stay away from the super sticky stuff. So fruit snacks, which some kids get, some kids don't, and a lot of medications that are served in gummy forms, I would try to stay away from those. And then foods like goldfish, Teddy Grahams, stuff like that, it just turns into mush and it sits in these grooves of these kids' teeth who already have a poor quality enamel, and it turns into a cavity pretty quick. But the silver diamine is probably what he got.
Yeah.
It was just brushed on.
It was brushed on
Yeah.
and the teeth immediately turned black.
Yeah, so thankfully, there's a new product called Curadont that hopefully that dentist or another dentist around you will get. And it does the same exact thing, but it doesn't discolor the tooth. It's actually just going out on the market. So that would be something that unfortunately it won't undo that. But if he needs the treatment again to preserve other space or other spots on the teeth, then that might be a product to look out for.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Very much appreciate it.
Do we have any other questions in the room? Okay, well, thank you so much. You're welcome. I know that, this will be recorded and so other families will be able to access it who have gone through transplant. And I'm so grateful for your expertise. So at this point, we're going to take a break. There at least was during the scientific meeting, there should be snacks and things right outside. So we will come back by 11. So you have an extra 5 minutes, 20-minute break. Did you want to say something, Natasha? Oh, okay. So yeah, go ahead, take a break. The restrooms are to the left. Snacks should be straight ahead. All right. Welcome back. If there are any Krabbe families out there that can hear me, we'll make our way back in. We do have a modified agenda that did not get into the folders on time. But instead of where it says industry talk, we're actually going to hear from Dr. Laura Ading from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She pre-recorded this session, but she is a fabulous person to have in our leukodystrophy camp. She has seen several Krabbe patients and other leukodystrophies, and we're going to watch her now.
Good morning. My name is Laura Ading. I'm a physician scientist and child neurologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And it's my pleasure to join you today to talk about building hope through research in rare diseases. My apologies that I'm not joining you there in person today, but I am joining you in the spirit. And please feel free to reach out to me afterward. For disclosures, I do work with Orchard, Takeda, and Biogen, both research and consultant. I have NIH funding and work closely with parent advocacy groups and have research funding from several of them as well. All leukodystrophies are rare. So are all pediatric cancers. Collectively, we have actually a really loud voice. Because while individually rare, if we look across the leukodystrophies, we think that they affect between 1 and 7,000 people. That's actually not rare at all. Just to make sure we all have a common understanding of the clinical trial lingo, I'm going to briefly walk you through how do we take an idea in the lab of how to treat a rare disease and move it into clinical trials. And I will also name that the rare diseases are starting to shake this process up. The traditional clinical trial is broken down into 4 different phases with approval. The first phase is safety. Phase 2 is looking at how well it works or efficacy, as well as dosing. Phase 3 includes more people where you're primarily looking at efficacy as your first goal and safety as your second goal. There's then regulatory review, and then if it gets approved, you move into a phase 4 study, which is that post-marketing and safety and efficacy, which lasts for years after approval. In rare diseases, oftentimes the phase 1 through 3 are combined into shorter groups or oftentimes just one study that oftentimes has multi-levels where you're testing different doses in very small numbers of groups with formal steps or milestones where you can go further into the next group and treat more children, right? And so the way we design clinical trials in rare diseases is oftentimes slightly different, but the same general approach is true. And then you absolutely need that post-marketing phase as well. So particularly with gene therapy, the FDA was requiring up to 15 years and ideally lifelong of monitoring to look at, is this really safe long-term, as well as, is the benefit enduring? What if something only helps kids for 2 years and then causes harm? Those are things that post-marketing phase is going to be essential to identify. Very few of the medications that are developed in the lab make it into an approved therapy. And sometimes that's because they don't get into the cells that they're supposed to, or they can't get into the brain, or you chose the wrong route of administration. But even more importantly, it's oftentimes, especially in the rare diseases, because you chose the wrong question, either the wrong target population by age or disease state. you measured it in the wrong way, or you found a small benefit in a subset of children, but it wasn't generalizable across a larger population. Increasingly, the FDA is realizing that actually one of the main problems is not listening to families. And so they are integrating into the trial design, making sure you're asking families what is important, and then addressing that in your clinical trial, rather than going across as this paternalistic approach to clinical trial design, where the physicians and the scientists decide what's important. We're actually making patient-centric clinical trial design, which is a really exciting new area of clinical development. So, what do we do about it? The basics of bone marrow transplant are we take cells from one person who's healthy, typically hematopoietic stem cells or mesenchymal stem cells, and we give them to someone that is missing a critical instruction piece within their own cells. And so this is the fundamental basis of hematopoietic stem cell transplant or stem cell transplant in general. And those new cells make residence within the bone marrow and the long bones. And then the person becomes a hybrid or a chimera. They have some cells that were originally from them and some cells that aren't. And for neurologic diseases, those hematopoietic stem cells or stem cells, a small percentage of them actually migrate up into the brain and become new cells. And in particular, they become a type of cell called microglia. And so stem cell transplant and transplants-based gene therapy does not fix all the cells in the body. What it does is it fixes primarily the microglia within the brain. And so this has led to a lot of additional therapy as we're trying to figure out, again, how to get the fix into the specific cell type and the specific cell region in the brain, which is an area that is both very dense from a cell standpoint, is poorly accessible because there's actually physical barriers that are blocking drugs from getting inside. And so we can give the missing piece directly through things like enzyme replacement therapy. This has not historically worked incredibly well within the brain. We can give the instruction manuals, and this is what gene therapy does. You can change how the instructions are carried out, such as oligonucleotides that can modify expression at the RNA level. You can help downstream and just circumvent the problem if the challenge is a missing piece, or you can fix the instruction manual. And this is what gene editing does. So rather than giving a completely new copy, we go in and change the instruction manual in the cell itself. So what about gene therapy? Because I know this is an area of incredible interest in Krabbe. There are two different flavors. One is ex vivo, which you take the cells from the person, you add in the missing piece through a viral vector into the cells, and then you infuse them back into the patient, or in vivo, which means you just add the missing piece through the viral vector directly to the patient. There are multiple different approaches that have been tried. The two most common approaches are lentiviral vector, which requires that autologous stem cell transplant, or adeno-associated viruses, or AAV therapy, which is a DNA virus that can hold that package and then infect cells within the body. There's a lot of interest in developing novel ways to either genetically engineer the envelope itself in order to carry it into specific cell types or regions, or even using non-viral envelopes such as lipid nanoparticles, although we've struggled to be able to target those to the brain. Those are likely going to be tested out in the liver diseases first. So you need to genetically manipulate the vector or that envelope to carry the missing piece of information, but really take out most of the parts that make it a virus, which is why we call them vectors, right? They're really envelopes that have been emptied out and are just carrying the pieces of information we need them to. And again, we can take the cells from the person and then add in the virus. This is the lentiviral approach, and then infuse them back into the person. And so this is the example of what you think of for Skysona, which is the ALD one. Lenmeldy, which is the MLD gene therapy. These both use a lentiviral approach. And again, because they're stem cell transplant based, they're really fixing the microglia of the cells. All gene therapy requires a very long post-infusion monitoring period. And this is because some of the risks from gene therapy happen right away, like liver toxicity. But most of the things that you worry about with the gene therapy are either in the first month or two, or they're happening years later. And so the FDA has requested with gene therapy that everyone, either through clinical trials or through even when it's administered clinically, have a long-term monitoring for 15 years minimum and potentially for life. And that's primarily looking at toxicity from what was given to the patient, the genotoxicity or the cancer risk, which is particularly high with things like lentivirus because it inserts permanently into the new cells. Other things we're looking at for are long-term efficacy. What if something benefits children for 5 years, but then it's all risk and no benefit? We need to develop new and better treatments in that case. Or what if the benefit washes away after 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? You would potentially need to develop new treatments to help an older population. So in the case of some transplants, we use the virus directly to help children. And so in the case of some trials, you do transplant to help the microglia, and then you do an AAV-based therapy to help primarily the neurons that are affected as well. And so AAV gene therapy is an interesting approach that has been used for actually quite a few different investigations, including several approved therapies. And this has been used in clinical trials for several leukodystrophies as well, particularly with the AAV9 serotype. And that is the different naturally occurring form of AAV that gets into particularly the neurons of the brain, but less so the microglia. We worry about neutralizing antibodies with AAV, which means the body can attack the virus that you're giving. There's really no benefit, we think, from repeated administrations of AAV just because the body can develop such a robust response to it. You worry about liver toxicity, immune responses, again, toxicity from making too much of the gene. There's a theoretical risk of tumors and cancer. And again, we're also worried about how long the benefit lasts, right? You wouldn't want to put someone through something life-threatening if it's only going to last for 6 months or 2 years, right? Our goal is really to hopefully make a transformative, enduring therapy when we're doing gene therapy. And so that 15 years of monitoring for AAV gene therapy is looking at all of the long-term safety profile of children that have received the gene therapy. One of the other places we're innovating in gene therapy is how it's given, right? Originally, gene therapies were all given through the blood, and the hope that was they got into the brain, but that A, is not efficient, and B, that makes you have to manufacture a lot of gene therapy, which is really the most labor-intensive and costly part of the process. As we all are aware, gene therapies for the leukodystrophies, their prices are in the $3 to $4 million per administration realm. That's an incredibly high number. And part of that challenge is how costly it is to manufacture enough. And so I think one of the places gene therapy is going to innovate is creating therapies that are more targeted and less costly. Krabbe is an interesting disorder in that it's actually quite complex. While it's monogenic, meaning it's caused by a change in just the CALC gene, there's actually over 200 different changes or mutations that have been described. It also has a very common pseudodeficiency allele, which means sometimes we fail in the lab to be able to measure how well the enzyme works. And there are also other polymorphisms, which means changes in that same gene that are modifying how well the protein works. And so I think one of the areas of research and development in the Krabbe space is being able to understand the complex genetics of Krabbe and how changes along that same thread of information or coding region are changing how that protein is working in the human body. The proposed mechanism of Krabbe disease is that cytosine is normally an essential part of the cell membrane that's part of a lipid raft. And when we have too much cytosine, it starts to accumulate in different and undesired ways in the cell membrane. And this disruption of lipid rafts, which are essential for cell signaling and cell health, leads to demyelination, which is loss of the protective fatty wrapping of the neurons. And also it leads to inflammation. And Krabbe is really a very inflammatory disease. And so I know there's a lot of groups that are interested in immune modulation as a potential way to help children with Krabbe disease, because it really is in part, we think, the inflammation that's driving a lot of the early injury. And so where are we? We have an ongoing clinical trial, but that's really helping a very small percentage of the population that we know is affected by Krabbe. So where do we need to be? We need to be in a place where children, regardless of the form of Krabbe disease, have a really clear path forward. And we need to have multiple therapies that are developed and available for our population and community. And so we have the early diagnosis through newborn screening, but now we need to improve our monitoring pathways through research and better understanding of the disease, so we know who needs intervention when and how to get them to the therapy at the right time, and who needs reassurance. So how do we get there? The answer is really research, research, research. And so many of our families choose to participate in research as a way for us to be able to better understand who needs an intervention at what point. I am part of the Global Leukodystrophy Initiative, which is now a 10-institution consortium of leukodystrophy centers that they're dedicated to improving the lives and understanding of children with leukodystrophies. And so one of the diseases that we are supporting is Krabbe disease, as we better understand who will benefit from what treatments and how to measure before there's a problem that there's going to be a difference. The challenges with what we know about rare diseases in general, and this affects Krabbe too, is really anchored in the decline or the strong neurologic symptoms. And so how to detect that earlier. The Pittsburgh group has really led some beautiful studies understanding those early phases of disease. But overall, what we understand about these diseases is anchored in the later phases. And so understanding that very early phase is going to be increasingly important now that we have an entire community of children that are going to be diagnosed before they have any challenges. And we need better prognostic biomarkers, which is biomarkers that we can measure early in the disease that help us to predict the future. And so where are we going? Really exciting places. As a field, generically, we're moving into gene editing, which is fixing someone's own copy, where there's some exciting papers using in utero intervention. So for a disease like Krabbe, that may begin actually before a child is born, developing ways to help beforehand is going to be a really exciting area of development over the coming years. And for the vectors we have, we need more efficient to bring down cost and lower the risk of delivering high levels of a vector. And we need more targeted vectors that are getting into the cells we need them to get into. And we need long-term monitoring of children through research so we can understand who needs help and when. And after we do therapies, we need to monitor for a long time too, just so we can see, is this safe and is this enduring? That has incredible impact on how we understand the benefit across a population that is very different than we have ever understood in Krabbe before. So again, earlier testing, the better prediction, treatments across the subtypes, and treatments across the severity span. I wanted to thank everyone for your time and attention today on behalf of my group at the Leukodystrophy Center of Excellence at CHOP to all of our families affected by rare diseases. Thank you for really helping us to push forward research and the opportunities for both this generation as well as the next generation. Thank you.
I know that Dr. Adang is not here to answer questions, but if anybody has any questions, Dr. Rajan is equally qualified to answer them. So does anybody have any questions about the current research, the treatments that are in clinical trials, anything online? Okay, then we're going to make a quick transition. Should we pull up chairs? How many chairs do we need for your panel? Okay. That is what we're going to do then. Do you want this one or the other one? Okay, because we have two. Okay, you have one. No, you're in charge. I'm in charge. Okay. Now going to hear from the Burrows family about undergoing treatment and clinical trials for Krabbe disease. And Dr. Rajan is going to moderate.
Start by saying that we need to, the goal of this was to shift gear from hearing from Laura and myself to actually hearing voices of your own so that you can, we can shift the focus to actually the human side of this and understand from the family perspective what a journey is like. So I feel underqualified to kind of lead this discussion. So feel free to interrupt and talk in between. The goal is to have a conversation and to help each other through this journey. I also want to underline, our goal is not to is not to talk up or talk down a center, an institution, a trial, none of that. Our goal is to understand this as a journey, as a family through this. So with that, I'm gonna give you the mics and can you help us understand, give us a background of your journey with Nico? Do you want to start with introducing yourselves?
My name is Nick.
My name is Jenna.
I'm Karina. I'm the grandma.
My name is Savannah.
And this is?
This little guy is Nico.
Hi, Nico. God, he has the most handsome smile ever.
Don't tell him that.
Ow.
Well, I could start it after you because I can talk about how I was pregnant with him. It was a rough pregnancy. I wasn't really doing well, and pretty much we'll fast forward to 33 weeks. I was 33 weeks pregnant, and he was still in my belly, and something traumatic happened. I wasn't there for it, I guess. I was unconscious part of a lot of it, so I'll give it to Nick to talk about it.
Pretty much found, as she says, found her unconscious in the bathroom. Paramedics out, got her into the hospital. She had preeclampsia and turned into eclampsia, extremely high elevated blood pressure. Seizures and stuff like that happened. She was in the hospital for about a day. And then they suggested, because she was about 7 weeks to go until this little gentleman came out, to have it early because of the eclampsia. So she didn't really know much of what was happening, but we had Nico. Obviously he was small. He came out 2 pounds, 3 ounces. I want to say, wasn't it? Or 3 pounds, 2 ounces. Sorry. Happy little guy. Mom was doing well afterwards, thankfully. And then about a week later, because he was in the NICU the PICU for a week. And then we were actually on our way to a store to get some clothes for him and whatnot. And as was mentioned earlier, we had the call from the pediatrician, the doctor, saying that we need to come in and talk about, there's stuff they found on the newborn screening. And obviously that turned out to be Krabbe, which was a huge blow, as I'm sure every family in here has had something to do with. It's not something that you want to hear about. So that was a very major shock to us. As you can say, every emotion going through your head at a time: anger, unhappiness, happiness because you still have him. Exactly. Yeah, and it was one of those moments where when you finally do go in to talk with the doctors, you don't know what it is, because you've never heard of it, because obviously it's one of those very rare diseases, so you don't know what to expect. And then once they explain it to you, it kind of even somewhat hits home, but it's not you don't know about it because you still don't know everything about it, because these people themselves don't know much about the disease. So you have to then go talk to the specialist, and for us was in Chicago at Larry's. They were very, very good people. And yeah, went from there, and I'm gonna go from there. From Chicago times.
Well, that was pretty much our, I guess, the story of Nico, our beginning introduction, I would say. Yeah, he was born at Swedish American Hospital in Rockford, Illinois, and the pediatric doctor told us that this is out of my scope. I can't help him. So then was it the next? Yeah, it was the next day. He was transported to Lurie's, and then they started talking about the stem cell transplant and how it was, a good, choice, or just one of the therapies. It wasn't a cure. So we went through that. He was in the hospital about for 4 or 5 months, got out around Christmas.
Jenna, can I interrupt there and pull you back? For our families who might face this in the future, can you give us a sense of how you explored your options at that point of time?
Well, honestly, I really don't remember a lot of this time. I think I was just trying to process all of it. And we chose to do the stem cell transplant after speaking with everybody in our family. Like, at the end of the day, this is an us decision, but who is it going to impact also? So yeah, I feel like just him talking to his side of the family, me talking to my side of the family, all of us talking together, we decided that we should go forward with the stem cell transplant. We just, when we're told that if we don't do anything, he's gonna pass away, I don't, it's like, what else are you gonna really choose? Exactly. And my mom can also talk about that as well, because I talked to you and the whole family about what was being given to us and what we should decide. So from a grandparent's standpoint, how did you feel?
There really weren't many options. I mean, the only option we really had was to either do the stem cell transplant or not do it. And not doing it wasn't really an option. We all felt like we had to give him the best chance that we could for survival. And we all agreed that it was something we had to do. But I mean, it is saying that, God works in mysterious ways. I mean, if Jenna wouldn't have been unresponsive that night, I mean, maybe they wouldn't have caught it soon enough. So we are very thankful that unfortunately she did have to go through that, but we were able to catch the screening and everything and have him transplanted in time, which we're very thankful and grateful for.
Thank you for sharing, your journey with us. It is not an easy decision, right? You're right. We have options, but not the perfect options, right? In every family has to consider what their goals and what the outcomes mean to them and what that means to their family when they're faced with your choices. And you're right, this is all you, but it's important for the medical community to lay those choices out to you for you to understand what's out there. Can you guide us through what happened through transplant? What was your experience through transplant?
Surprisingly, I would say it was not as much as you think it would be. You expect, lots of doctors everywhere, but it was actually only a half an hour of him being injected with a needle. That was kind of the most exciting thing of the day, I guess you could say. But the whole process before talking with the doctors, letting them know that, as you were saying earlier, filling in those genetic markers that he doesn't have currently, and hopefully, can help him in the long run. It was, describe that. Again, a no-brainer. It was, as long as it's going to help him, or at least, give him a positive outlook that could potentially help him now and also in the years to come with his peripheral and his other functionings. And yeah, it was.
Me too. Well, if we're being totally honest, when transplant started, I was terrified. I was afraid, because he was so teeny tiny, so little, and he had to get a G tube put in, central line put in, PICC line. Like this little tiny baby is just being marked up by all this stuff. And yeah, it was terrifying. I would do it again if I had to, because for that bit of time that was not cool, not good, we have this right now. So I mean, I feel like it was worth it in the end. But going through him going through like the transplant, just so you're aware, it's very, very, yeah, it's very scary. And you're gonna see things that you don't want to see, shouldn't have to see, but you do. And just know that it's a temporary pain that you're gonna feel watching your child go through all of that. And I believe if you get through that, you get a pretty good outcome, because we have him. He had to go through quite a bit. It sucks watching your child have to suffer and have to go through that, but in the end, it seems like it did wonders for now. So
Totally true, right? I mean, I think it's important to recognize when you say transplant, many people think it's surgery. It's not. It's just almost very similar to a blood transfusion. So that process is not the challenge, but the chemotherapy before, the side effects of the transplant after, and that journey, is not easy. And it's not easy to do without family support through that whole period. Let's move forward to how did you then learn about your options after? How did you hear about clinical trials after?
well, when it started, they actually brought up the clinical trial, which was the first phase, which was not Reclaim. I think yeah, but there's a name for it, and Rescue. Yeah. And we contemplated that as well, but I think a lot of people can agree and imagine that we were already being thrown so many different things with our poor little baby. We just didn't really want to chance anything. We wanted to see if he could make it through transplant. Then we'd revisit it. But yeah, they did offer it to us when he was first born. Then the second trial, Reclaim, opened up, and we, asked about that and inquired about it, and they said that they wanted to, put Nico through it and see what would happen. And again, it was a really big, because we're very family oriented, so it was a really big family conversation, and we were all laying out, pros and cons. And at the end, we decided that we should go ahead and do it. So
Thank you for sharing with us. It's important to realize that it's still in clinical trial phase, right? Like for our families, clinical trials at phase 1 still, like Laura mentioned, it's still evaluating efficacy, and then it moves towards, it's still evaluating safety first, and then it moves towards evaluating efficacy. So in the beginning, you chose not to, and then after transplant, you went back in there. Can you share with us what your hesitations and fears in the beginning were?
bless you. I think all of us can, but I'm gonna have. Yeah.
Pretty much everything and anything, actually. Whether it's going to affect him even more and a negative effect than it could in a positive effect. If instead of helping him, because we obviously, everybody wants your child to walk. Me being a father, I am very big into my sports. All bad teams, unfortunately, but still very into it. Being a father, you want to play catch with your son. You want to do everything you can to have him live a childhood like I had it when I was a kid. So thinking and hoping that you can have that with him later on in life. And as long as it's a positive effect and it doesn't take away from what already he lacks, that was probably at the top of my worry pole, I guess you could say. So far it's helped him. We've been very, very grateful of what's happened so far with everything, the transplant and the clinical trial. He's progressing. He's not going backwards, which is, like I said, at the top of my poll, which was worrying for me. But I think that would probably be the biggest thing, regression instead of progression.
Yeah, that's really helpful. It's important to keep in mind that we're still in that clinical trial, right? And it's important to know that that we will understand the outcomes of the clinical trial only when we look back after the trial is completed. But it is helpful for us to know the journey that you had through that. What do you think on hindsight, where things that you thought about, where when you look back, you think, okay, that was not something that I understood very well before, but I understood better. For families who are faced with these options in the future, what would you say you would look back and tell yourself?
I would say just it's gonna be a long road. It's gonna affect your mental health. And take care of yourself, because I went into it and I've never experienced it, and we fear most what we don't understand and the unknown. So I was, in fear of it, but I didn't know how to process it, and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I didn't know what was really to come. Afterwards, it was easier. So I would definitely say that to myself in the past, or to parents who are going to be going through this, is just take care of take care of yourselves. Really watch out for your mental health and make sure you have a pretty good support system as well. Because I always, when I look back, I always realize one big thing is I would not have been able to get through this if I did not have my support system, my family. I wouldn't have. No, not at all. Because on the days where I was weak and I felt like this world's unfair, this sucks, this isn't cool, like there he was for that day to be strong for me. There she was to be strong for me that day. And then vice versa on days when they didn't feel very strong. I was there for them. So I feel like when you are going through this, like KrabbeConnect, if some families don't really have extended family, like we're fortunate enough to have, KrabbeConnect would be a great resource. They helped us when, we gave birth to Nico and he had to go through his stem cell transplant. So yeah, it's a lot, but you'll get through it.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's important to recognize, right? When we think about newborn screening, we think about it, sometimes I think, oh, one step's done, but it's important to know that this is not a sprint. It's a marathon, right? Every stage is challenging. And it's important to work together as a family through it. And I thank you a lot for like bringing up that mental stress. I don't think it's easy. And I think we've started telling families about how you need to take care of yourself. And you as an individual, you as a family, it's important to take care of, it's important to get me time. It's important to get us time. Because your children are going to need you for the long run. And so you need to take care of yourself during this. What else would you like to share for our family in the future?
As she was mentioning, there's lots of support groups through all social medias, KrabbeConnect. Reach out to anybody. We're always available. Reach out to anybody who else. If you don't know anybody, go through Facebook, try and find other families. I know I've talked, we both talked to many different families, asking questions, asking for advice on different things. Never be scared to open up and reach out to people, because it is, obviously it's a very bad situation you have to go through, but you can try and make it as best you can with the people around you, and being able to try and help one another and each other out through your experiences, so somebody else later on down the line doesn't have to go through that again. If there's a certain thing that you can do to potentially stop that, I would say.
And I also want to shed a spotlight on how, yes, it is horrible for the parents of the child who have to go through this, but my mom is very overprotective, and I'm pretty sure when I had to be a big girl and make the decision on my own, she was probably like, well, what's she gonna decide? What's she gonna decide? Like, and it probably was, because we value her opinion, but, at the end of the day, it's what we decide. And I'm sure she wanted to have her say. So I also want to, have her talk about what it's like being the grandma, like being so close to the child, like that's your baby, but wait, no, it's not. Cause yeah, I feel like that was quite miserable, wasn't it?
Well, I do want to say that you both including us in your decisions, asking for our opinions and everything did mean a lot. But as you said, at the end of the day, it was your decision. I think I told you that multiple times. I mean, because me as a parent, I don't even know what I would do had that have been me. So you guys and your strength and making those decisions and just seeing how great he's doing, how far he's came. it was very hard in the beginning because yeah, after the transplant, he was sick for so long and away from home for so long, which was so hard for us being so close. We had to make our trips to Chicago every so often to spend the holidays with you and stuff like that. So it was, it's been a journey, but it's been well worth it. I mean, he's amazing. I can't even tell you how much I admire him and look up to him for everything he's been through. And he's still happy and still fighting, still giving it his all. So we're very proud of him and Jenna and Nick for everything they've been through and including us and this journey with them. And I'm proud to be the grandma and mom.
We're all very grateful for that. And you know, I want to open it up to all of you. The objective of this was to like share the human side of one journey, where each one of us have different journeys with our children. Some of us with transplant, some of us without transplant, some of us with clinical trials, some of us without. But we're all in, you know, the goal is still the same. I'm gonna open up for questions, if any of you have any for the family. Want to start?
So coming from the newborn screening side of all this, when you look back at how the news was delivered to you, is there anything you would have changed? Did you feel like you were supported as they told you this news and you probably didn't even realize newborn screening had happened because most people don't. So I would just love that insight as we're preparing states to like properly deliver this news. If you have anything that you would want to be done differently.
And you may not.
I don't know about differently because there's obviously no good way to tell a parent that your kid has a rare disease or any disease whatsoever. Obviously, the first time we heard about it was in a car that we have to go in and talk to our doctor about something that came up on the screening. Like you said, we didn't even know about the screening, or I didn't at least. I don't know if there was anything I personally would change, just because it's obviously one phone call to then go into talk and face to face and then go from there. But I don't, off the top of my head, I don't think there's anything that I would have changed.
That's really helpful. So
Yeah,
do you
we've
feel
heard some really bad stories, so this makes me happy that you guys had that good experience.
I was going to say it's an evolution, right? We learn from this and then we move towards a better space. You know, I always wondered, do you feel there are sometimes where I sit and give diagnosis to families and I can definitely see that after a certain point, I know that we're not hearing things, right? Do you feel like it would be better to do it in multiple different, how does reiteration work? Where does, you know, would you like to hear all of it in the beginning? Would you not? Do you feel like that's a personal decision?
I feel like you should know about it all right when you're being told, because I mean, the experience wasn't bad. Yeah, we were in the car and we were told what this was. And they said that we wanted to talk to you tomorrow. And this is when our little baby is in the NICU, already premature. And they're talking about how he has this disease and that it's not a good disease. But hey, come in tomorrow. So that gave us all a whole night of Googling and just not good timing, I would say. But when we did get there the next day, then the doctor did explain, you know, what it was. But he again didn't know a lot either. So he was kind of like at the same-ish level as what we were reading on Google. We got a little bit more hope once we went to, you know, Lurie's. So
Just wanted to say thank you for sharing. We're one of the older people that we had the 3-4 months worth of testing, the spinal taps, the horrible testing. And we're very grateful that you guys can get, other people can get a diagnosis so fast. but there's still this huge responsibility of getting that information. And so I think that's shared with all of us. I'm very grateful and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I just wanted to address the mental health issue. Is there, so mental health, regardless of whether you've been treated or untreated, where you are in your journey, is such an important component. I know it's so much easier, taking care of yourself is so much easier said than actually done. It's at times impossible. So the micro moments, once the people say take those micro moments, I'm just like, that's a bunch of bullshit. Okay. Is there a team in place when we know we got the SWIFT medical team right there in the room with them? Is there a mental health component, a counseling team that they can turn to, when any of us can turn to at any stage of the procedures, of the testing, of the trials? Is that, is that on the forefront of everyone's mind?
Yes, there is. And Lisa said it depends on where you are. Honestly, I think many centers have a comprehensive team now. And we recognize, in the very first few visits, I always have that conversation that irrespective of the disease, any neurodegenerative disease is going to be a stressful event on the individual, on the couple, on the extended family. It not only not only affects the patient, but it affects everyone individually. And I tell families it's not uncommon for us to see mental health issues in the parents. Many couples go through, and this is documented, that many couples go through marital stress during their course of taking care of the child. The families have significant impact. So our center does have social work, does have mental health individuals who are available to all of our families from the very first step of diagnosis reveal. Now, it's important for families to know these are resources that are available. And at any point, but it's important for you to have that relationship with your medical team to be able to talk through these things, to ask for those things and ask for that help and support.
A two-part question, I suppose. I just wanted to confirm or clarify, did you have the stem cell cord blood transplant with gene therapy? Is that my understanding?
So we did, but it was separated. So when he was 3 weeks old, he had a stem cell, which was the AAV version. And then he had the gene therapy. He just started last August. So he was already 2 years old when he just started it.
Nick, you mean he had the bone marrow transplant first?
The stem
right?
cell transplant first, yes.
And then he had the AAV gene therapy.
Yeah. Almost 2 years. Just shy of 2 years is how long it would have been.
Yeah, the trial that's open right now has a component where you can combine both of it together, and then there's also a component where it can be separated. So.
And then I'd like to just piggyback off of the mental health, something I've been advocating for the very beginning. While I strongly believe there should be a professional mental component to all families that are going through any type of trauma, for lack of better words, I also want to emphasize how important it is for families to have a personal mental relationship, because it is personal, it is emotional. And sometimes from a professional standpoint, it doesn't quite yet hold enough value with the journey that they're in. For example, I know for some families, including myself, I was able to make more of emotional connection and navigate my journey by learning of other families and about other families and conversating with other families and having that type of support. Not that I didn't need the professional component of it, but I feel like on a more personal level, it just holds more value and more relationship, if that makes sense. And I feel like that there's a gap there for a lot of reasons, one being HIPAA, right? And so I would really encourage the professional industry, the medical portion of the industry, to really rely on nonprofit organizations like KrabbeConnect to unify not only professionally, but personally, should these families want to have that type of connection for mental health purposes, and as well as just feeling normal and because they're entering a whole new world, and it's the rest of their life.
Completely agree. I think there's a limit to what I can do as a physician, right? I think there's invaluable information that a family learns from another family who's been through that journey. And I think it's super important, the role that patient advocacy groups, even without any of these diseases, right? In early parenthood, if you're a first-time parent, that by itself, you need mental health support. It's not, it's a whole new arena. And if you throw the diagnosis in, it's a far more challenging thing. So it's important to have all sorts of support. Oh, no. Okay. I know you had a question before.
Thanks for sharing your story too. We're from Illinois too. But I was just wanted to go back on, you were talking about timing and diagnosis. With Alyssa, she was 3 years old. It's like 2 weeks after she turned 3. Her birthday's April 5th. So, just things were happening so rapid with her. So it was just like by the end of April, she just lost her ability to do everything. And when we found that it was Krabbe disease, it was 2 years later. And here I have a 3-year-old boy in 4 months. And I just thought I had to watch him go through the same thing. And to know that the transplant was out there. And I just took that risk. And just look at him. So that's how I just wanted to say. But thank
you for sharing. We actually met you guys in Florida too. I remember you guys.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think we learn as a community, right? And I think we win as a community because we can get to a space where we can have newborn screening.
You were talking about, neurologists not really knowing about the disease. We were up Googling and, searching. We seen the Hunter's Hope and Duke University doing the transplants. And so my friend was just like, call Dr. Kurtzberg, call doctor. And she was just like, how fast can you get here? And yeah. So that's all I just want to say too.
Thank you for sharing.
This question is is Nick.
Correct, yeah.
I know a lot of well, I haven't been to a symposium in a little bit. I'm from out of town with Carolyn. So when the last time I went with her, it wasn't a lot of males around, and that was kind of heartbreaking for me. It was a lot of women there by themselves. So it's good to see that you guys are together. And so I just wanted to know how that impacted you with your child. And did you end up losing male friends? How do you cope with that as a male? Because we as women, we kind of know certain stuff. We have our little ins and outs and things like that. But from a male's perspective, like how do you deal with your emotions, and your psyche, and how do you vent and,
Not very well. I don't have very many friends to begin with. I'm pretty secluded in my own rights. But for me to be able to, get rid of stress, kind of blow off some steam, I try and every once in a while go golfing or fishing if I can. Things with these guys too. Go into a little like a zoo or something like that. Just anything with the family because it's a good time, it's fun. It gets them out and about. But no, it's I guess being a male is more, you're always thought to be more stout and more hard in your own head, which I am, unfortunately. Um, I guess it can become a double negative, I guess, where it's a positive in your own head, but it's a negative for other people because for me, I'm not very good at showing my emotions as it was before having Nico. And now having him and having to deal with everything surrounding him, I think probably I suppress my emotions even more than I did beforehand. I just push everything down as far as I can and hope that one day the bottle doesn't pop. Um, as we were saying, support groups is, I think, even more needed now than ever. Seeking mental help, I'm scared myself to even go to a regular therapist to see what's going on up in here. That's kind of a scary place to even try and delve into. So, um, talking with Jenna and Karina and Sean and all the other kids and everybody like that. It's my family overseas because my immediate family actually live over in England. So I have my family from over here. They're my closest ones to talk to. So it's kind of, as you say, as a man, it's harder for me to just come out into the open and, hey, I have a problem today, or this is what I'm feeling. It's kind of I guess a crutch in a way that I guess it gets deeper and darker the farther you go down, I think. So having, all the families here and people to talk to, it's a very big blessing. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's a lot of men here and I noticed it. So I hope that you notice it.
I did.
So that you can, see the positivity in it. And maybe that's a way for you, help you out down the road and get
Definitely.
connected with more male support because, women know what women go through. And, I could support you, but I don't know what a man, needs, But of course, I would always, be there for you. But there's a lot of men here and I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important, like I want to close us out, but say each of our journeys is different, right? So you could decide, we're now at the stage where we feel like we could give diagnosis early on, and that's a challenge by itself. But whichever you choose, right? If you choose not to transplant, if you choose to transplant, if you choose to transplant and trial, if you choose to trial and not transplant, there are all those different options, and we're still in that learning phase. It's important to find the right medical professionals who can walk the journey with you, but also equally important to find the patient advocacy groups, the friends, the family that can support you through that journey. And I'm glad we're all here together. So, because our wins are all collectively, it's going to help the next family moving forward, the next generation moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much for being willing to share with us today. We are going to close up, but I mean, I'm not done. Stacey gave me a list of things to share with you, but I wanted to make sure you know that even though this is within another conference, there's still the whole afternoon. Like if there are no sessions this afternoon that you'd want to attend, though I highly recommend the 4:00 one about newborn screening. Anyway, if you don't want to, please hang out. Please spend time together. This is our very first time doing this within the ULF, but I also wanted to share that the reason we chose to do this was because the ULF offers this to patient advocacy groups to help us be better stewards of the limited resources we have. To throw our own conference cost far more money than we ever could have imagined. And we felt like it was better to be giving that money back to families than to be putting on our own thing. And so that's why we've chosen to partner with the ULF and be a little mini conference. And so we're so grateful that you all came for our very first in-person one. We did participate in the virtual one in 2020, I believe it was. But yeah, we're just grateful because we're trying this out and we're learning, and we would love to hear from you all afterward. Like, what would you like to see in the future? How could we structure this differently? We're all about input. Okay. That's a picture of our board. So, sorry, you guys can go ahead and move. Unless, I'm sorry, I just assumed you would understand without me saying it. So sorry. You could go ahead and have a seat. So KrabbeConnect can't do any of this without you. And there's so many different ways that we can all be involved no matter which part of the journey we are in. In this room alone, we have those whose children were diagnosed more than 20 years ago. We have those who were diagnosed, you know, just a couple of years ago. We have such a range of stories, and we need every one of those. There is wisdom that comes from every aspect of this journey. And as a side note, before I get to this, many of you participated in the survey that I put out as part of my master's thesis, and I'm so grateful for that. I wish I hadn't anonymized the data because I got some responses that I was like, oh, I want to help this person. That survey is being used to change how KrabbeConnect is going to operate in the future because it helped pull out the needs, which again, we don't know if you don't tell us. Do you want a men's support group that just hangs out on Zoom once a month? Like, we can do that. We can, but we don't know these needs unless you tell us. One of the heartbreaking needs that came across my survey was that there are families who have chosen treatment who don't feel supported. And again, I don't know who these respondents were, but I hope you know that we do support you. We are so grateful that you had that opportunity, and I'm so sorry that you haven't felt supported. And again, I don't know if you're even in this room. I don't know. But we just want you to know that families are why KrabbeConnect exists. KrabbeConnect is run by volunteers completely. So there's always opportunities to get plugged in and to be involved, and that's why we are all here. So here's some of the reasons why we would love for you to be involved. Families can help advance scientific understanding. So as I mentioned, even in this room, there's a vast amount of knowledge. We are the ones who actually understand the disease as it is to live it, or to be a caretaker of it. So being involved in research projects helps advance research. And we also understand sometimes it's very difficult to share your story. And so we always want to take a trauma-informed approach with that. And if you ever feel like it's just too much, you are allowed to say no. We want to make sure that's very clear. Improving treatment. So by participating in clinical trials and research studies, you can help us advance this research. Something I've learned in the past few years of being very involved with a couple of different industry partners and learning from them is just how hard it is to bring a treatment to market. Not only, I mean, in rare disease, not only because of the amount of money that it costs, even just to figure out what needs to be fixed and then fix it, but to get the patients. This is a rare disease, and they have to have a certain amount of data that they can submit. So every single person that is willing and able to help drive this forward is more valuable than we can state. But also community and advocacy. As we all know, this community is why we all are here, because we want to be known. We want to be with people who know us and know what it's like to live this journey of Krabbe disease. And as I mentioned earlier, we are about to have the amazing opportunity to really advocate for newborn screening for Krabbe disease. And I'm happy to help anybody that wants to do that and help you know what you can do in your state, who you can talk to. Again, I know a lot of people in this room, your state's already screening, but for those online or watching this later, we need all of us. And in some states, it might, like Pennsylvania, like what I had to fix in Pennsylvania, it might require some other fixes, and I would love to help with that. So today, how can you help today? We actually have partnered with the Rosenau Family Research Foundation to initiate a study about the actual burden of the disease. Like, what does Krabbe disease mean in terms of what it looks like to the patient, to the family? There's never been a study done about this, and these are the types of studies that can not only help decision makers realize that we should be screening for things, but it can also help encourage industry partners to come into this space and help develop treatments. This is for people. I swear, Siri never works when I want her to. So the first part of this is a survey, and I actually did the survey on behalf of our family recently because they extended the length of time since your child has passed away. So right now, if your child has not passed away more than 8 years ago, you can participate in. And the reason that they had to set those limits was because they want the information to be as fresh as possible. As we all know, especially when you're dealing with a terminal disease, it can be really easy to forget what it was like. And so that's why they have the age limits. But the first part's a survey, and then there's also an interview, and there are stipends available for these. So for completing the survey, I don't remember what the gift card was. And then if you are do the 90-minute interview, I believe it's $175 that they will give you as a thank you. But this will go on to be in a publication after the research is conducted. So you're welcome to participate in that. And if you have not already signed up for the Krabbe Cures database, which has existed for at least 4 years now, this is something that it's kind of like a patient registry, but it's different because it's patient focused, it's patient reported data. And we also own the data as the Krabbe disease community. So industry partners can come to us and say, we would like to use this data for this, and we either give them the data or we don't. So it's a very important way, again, to get the idea of what it actually is like to have Krabbe disease and to live with it. Other ways to help. I know that we have talked a lot about fundraising, but obviously anything costs money to do. It actually costs an astounding amount of money to run a nonprofit, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it does. And that's why we want to make it clear we are a completely volunteer organization. No one is getting paid for anything that we're doing. We do it because we believe in supporting families with Krabbe disease. And so one of the ways you can help is hosting a fundraiser like Brennan and I are doing in September. In Hershey, we are very ambitious and we're hoping to raise about $100,000 because we figured Tori will be turning 10 this year, so 10,000 for each year, but we'll see. It's hard to raise money, right? It's not easy to raise money, but if you happen to be really good at it, we would love your help. Or do you work at a company that would sponsor a fundraiser like ours? We're still looking for sponsors. Or do you have corporate giving programs? Like one of the companies I used to work for would match donations because they also get a tax deduction for doing it. So there's so many different ways. And one of the things that I recommended in my master's research was that we start a monthly giving program so that anybody, even if they can only spare $5 a month, they have the opportunity to be part of helping other families. So we're going to be launching that at some point as well. So these are examples of our fundraisers. Our one in Hershey is going to be on September 7th. We wanted to move it to the East Coast because there's a lot of Krabbe families, especially in Pennsylvania, but on the East Coast, there are so many research institutions and so much awareness. And so we were hoping that those people would be willing to come and spend some money and help us make money. But we also wanted to move it around because of access for families. You know, it's previously been in Minneapolis, and there are a lot of families in Minnesota, but we wanted to give other families the opportunity to participate and have a fun night. This is a family-friendly event. It's being held at the Hershey Gardens. And there's a butterfly atrium. The gardens are still beautiful in September with tons of roses. And if you want to go to Hershey Park or do anything like that, let us know and we can make that happen. So I guess that's it. Do we have any? I know we said we are going to take a group photo. It looks like most of us are back. So do we have any questions about KrabbeConnect, about anything that we can, as a board, answer for you? Because we still have a couple minutes. Yes.
I'm Bob Browner with the United Leukodystrophy Foundation. I've finally retired myself out, but I'm still very busy. But it's I retired in 2014, and I re-retired a couple of years ago, and I'm still retired, but I'm not. So, once you're in this field, you're in this field. But I just really wanted to comment about KrabbeConnect's partnership with us, the ULF. That's one of the things when I took over was my goal. Bring everybody together under one roof so they don't have to have their own meetings. And so that's been a driving force. So I thought that was the most important thing. But I think the thing that drove me to that was all the docs that we have, and they have to go to meeting after meeting after meeting. I talked with Dr. Vanderveer probably the first year, and she said, I was at one of the early GLIA meetings, and she said, well, I send my kids back to Belgium because I'm gone 5 out of 6 weeks. And I said, we have to do something about that. So that was kind of my drive. So I practiced, with a couple organizations, and then we just you know, and you can see on your agenda, you can see how many different organizations that we're partnered with. And it's just, it's a win for us, but it's also a win for your organization because the cost, our cost to them is very minimal. And it's just, you know, cover the AV stuff. So it's just, it's a big win for everybody. And I really appreciate it. It's nice to have this large group here. And I've seen many of you at Hunter's Hope. So I, I appreciate it, but I'm thrilled that you're here and we do want you back next year. So that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Bob. And we're glad you haven't actually fully retired because we like having you around. For those who don't know, Bob, he got involved in leukodystrophy because his son had ALD. And so he is also one of us that was forced into this community, but has chosen to stay and to make it a better place. So we're grateful. Okay. Oh, yes.
I just had one comment for all of you who signed up for stipends. If you'll get with me before you leave, I have a paper that you can sign and a check for you. So just get with me after the photos.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you for taking time out to come here and to be with us. And we know it's not easy to travel with your children always. I mean, it's not even easy to travel with our twins. Who you will meet in a little bit. So I guess I'll hand it over to Natasha to tell us where to go for the group photo. And if there's anybody that needs to obtain people like Brennan, if you want to go get our children, then we can make sure they're included. I'll give that task to you.
Okay, we have not determined that yet, but we need to get a couple more group photos, so or family photos. So your family, Lisa, and then Amanda. Okay, let me. Okay, just give me a minute. Let me touch base with Jason.
Sorry, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. It just since everybody's here.
While we're all together, for those of you who arrived today and hadn't had a chance to look at the agenda, just to give you an idea, lunch will be served in the lobby area. There's a restaurant. There's a buffet there, and you can sit anywhere. The buffet is kind of in the middle, so if you just keep walking, you'll see the buffet, and dinner will be there, or lunch will be there. And then when the afternoon sessions start, again, the Krabbe conference is ideally over, but there are so many other conferences happening in the time blocks on your schedule, and you can choose any one of those to attend. And then if you follow the outline, it'll show you when dinner is, and there's a rest hour, and then dinner is at 6:30, and it's down here. It's buffet style, but then there's a big ballroom at the end here where everybody will have dinner. There's also, has the raffle and silent auction still open, or do they close at 12:30? Yeah. Right. So you might be able to catch the last few minutes of the silent auction. That is in the grand ballroom and it's all along the wall. There's several items there if you wanted to glance at them. And then there is a raffle, but again, you have maybe 10 minutes, maybe if you're lucky. And there's a raffle there too. And then last but not least, while we're waiting to get everything ready for the group photo, we do have a couple of items for us to raffle off to families. And I just want to make sure I didn't miss any families. We do have a list, but I don't know that it's fully updated. So if you want to be added to our raffle, we have a t-shirt. So there'll be two drawings, a t-shirt and a book by one of our Krabbe families, a Krabbe mom, Ann Rugari, who, if you don't know her, obviously she's a Krabbe mom to Gina and Nick. Did I get?
Nina was the illustrator of the book.
Correct. And so I just want to make sure if I don't call your name and you want to be added to our spin, how we're going to draw names here, just let me know. Austin Barron family, Cushman family, Cannon, Burrows. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Okay. The Hammonds and Shillings, Branches, and Schroeders. Did I miss anyone other than the Board family? Okay. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to take a handy dandy finger to spin. Would you like to tap this for me? Just push right there. And we're spinning. And where we go, nobody knows. We got a gray arrow right here, and it reached the branch family.
Okay.
All right. And then we'll have our cutie pie over here. Push the button. Can you push it? Oh, we're spinning, 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 spinning. Cushmans. Perfect. All right. Please, guys, just hang tight. We definitely want to get a group photo. So, yeah, main lobby, head out the front doors at the main lobby.